Chapter 28. Uncle Sun's talent with the saber is so outstanding. No wonder your saber skills are so amazing. Ziyue praised in a timely manner. Seeing Sun Nong's proud expression, he quickly took the opportunity to ask, "Then how is the 18 consecutive saber technique at perfection? How powerful is it?" The 18 consecutive saber technique at perfection. As far as I know, no one has cultivated this technique to perfection. However, my guess is that the 18 saber techniques should be combined into one saber. When the saber is slashed out, it is actually the superposition of the 18 saber techniques. Its power is at least 3 times stronger than before. Sun Nong was silent for a while before speaking. Ziyue heard this and nodded in understanding. It would take an ordinary person 3 to 5 years to reach minor mastery. It would probably take 10 years to reach great mastery. This saber technique was not considered a top-notch martial technique. Naturally, very few people would spend too much time and energy on it. It was normal for very few people to cultivate it to perfection. However, this was not a big problem for Ziyue, who had his spirit energy to speed up his cultivation. On the contrary, he felt that this kind of martial technique, which could be executed quickly and could explode with great power, was more suitable for him at the moment. In the following period of time, Sun Nong began to explain the method of using the 18 consecutive saber technique in detail. Almost every saber had a different frequency of using the spirit energy. Ziyue spent more than an hour to completely memorize it. Of course, if he wanted to master it and execute it without any mistakes, he would also need a period of practice. In the afternoon, the Pearl Restaurant's peak hour was over. Ziyue left with Sun Nong. "Uncle Sun, who is old Mr. Ho?" Ziyue asked curiously on the way. This time, he was going to be brought by Sun Nong to meet this old Mr. Ho, who he had only heard of but had never seen in person. Old Mr. Ho is an amazing person. He was one of the few people in the Scorching Sun gang. Although he was only at the outer forge level, his position was comparable to that of a manager at the peak of the inner forge level. He held great weight in the entire Qingatown branch. Not only does he own half of the Pearl Restaurant shares, but he also owns a silk shop and a rice shop. It's said that he has other businesses in Wujiang County. If you can get his approval, becoming an inner disciple will be an extremely simple matter. Sun Nong said with a look of admiration on his face. In terms of strength, old Mr. Ho might not be as good as him, but old Mr. Ho's status was 10 or 100 times higher than his. Everything still depends on Uncle Sun's recommendation. Ziyue said sincerely. He knew that the reason why Sun Nong was so concerned about his matter was that he must be seeking something. However, he was still grateful in his heart. There was nothing wrong with mutual benefit. As they spoke, an old-fashioned house that looked a little old but occupied an extremely wide area appeared in front of them. This was old Mr. Ho's residence. Dong, dong, dong. Sun Nong went forward and knocked on the door, his body slightly bowed. With a creak, the door opened. A man who looked like a butler stuck his head out and asked, "What's the matter?" "Suyi, it's me, little son of the Pearl Restaurant. This time, I have an extremely important matter to discuss with old Mr. Ho." Sun Nong hurried forward and said respectfully, "Wait here." With that, the door closed again with a creak. Then, the sound of footsteps gradually faded away. Even though the door was closed, Sun Nong did not dare to show the slightest impatience on his face. He waited patiently. Bai Ziyue stood at the back and did not say anything. He could not help but feel a little nervous. About 10 minutes later, the door opened again. Steward Su glanced at the two of them and said, "Come in. Master has agreed to see you." "Thank you, Suyi." Sun Nong hurriedly thanked him and walked in. Ziyue followed closely behind. Then, the two of them followed Steward Su into the house. After entering the house, Ziyue found that it was more spacious than he had imagined. Not only were there many flowers and plants planted in the yard, but there was also a 300-square-meter pond. Because of the arrival of winter, the lotuses in the pond had withered and broken. However, through the water surface, they could still see many golden, white, and red carps swimming in it. They were so densely packed that it was very ornamental. After walking through the courtyard, a tall threshold appeared in front of the two of them. After crossing the threshold, they saw a somewhat skinny old man sitting by the stove, drinking hot tea. Beside him was a maid, who put a piece of cake into his mouth from time to time. Old Mr. Ho. Sun Nong greets old Mr. Ho. Seeing the old man, Sun Nong hurriedly greeted him respectfully. Speak. Old Mr. Ho glanced at Ziyue, who was behind Sun Nong, and said lightly, Old Mr. Ho, the person behind me is called Ziyue. He is a genius, a martial arts genius. While working in the Bright Pearl restaurant, he practiced the Diana stance for 10 days. Now, it only took him 40 days to practice the Diana stance to the small success level. I know that old Mr. Ho has always been fond of talents, and you don't want a martial arts genius to be covered in dust. So, I boldly recommend him to you. Sun Nong took a deep breath. He knew that whether his future would be improved or not depended on this, so he spoke with faint excitement. Oh, old Mr. Ho's originally calm expression immediately changed. He sat up straight and looked at Ziyue again. He said, Practice the Diana stance once. Okay. Ziyue naturally knew that if he wanted to be recognized, he had to demonstrate his ability. Without hesitation, he immediately displayed the small success level of the Diana stance. You have indeed reached the small success level of the Diana stance. Old Mr. Ho nodded and looked at Steward Su. He said, Go and ask him. Yes, old master. Steward Su quickly nodded and left. Ziyue and Sun Nong, who were standing below, did not show any strange expressions when they saw this. Old Mr. Ho was a chore apprentice, and his strength was only at the outer forging level. To be able to achieve his current status, he was naturally not a reckless person who would believe a few casual words. It was very normal to send someone to investigate and verify. In the following period of time, old Mr. Ho did not neglect the two of them. He served them pastries, gave them a seat, and invited them to tea. As they chatted, he asked a few questions from time to time. Ziyue and Sun Nong answered one by one until Steward Su returned. Good. He's indeed a martial arts genius. After hearing Steward Su's whisper and seeing the detailed information about Ziyue's situation on a piece of paper in his hand, old Mr. Ho praised and stood up from his chair. Sun Nong, right? You did well. A martial arts genius like Ziyue should not be buried. That would be the loss of the entire Scorching Sun gang. As he spoke, old Mr. Ho looked at Sun Nong and continued, If you have any requests, just tell me. I will do my best to satisfy you. Chapter 29. I just want to work for old Mr. Ho. Sun Nang's heart was filled with excitement as he said repeatedly, The rice shop is still short of a steward. Arrange for him to work over there. Old Mr. Ho pondered for a moment before giving the order. Yes. Steward Su nodded, then called out to the excited Sun Nong and led him away. What about you? I'm sure you don't want to waste your time in the Pearl restaurant as a chore apprentice, right? Ho Lin Kuan looked at Ziyue. I want to become an inner apprentice. Ziyue said calmly. At this moment, he had actually calmed down a lot. Talent represented many things. The difference in treatment between those with talent and those without was huge. Just like in his previous life, those with good grades could sit in the front row and be surrounded by pretty girls. The teachers would pay more attention to their words. As for those with bad grades, they could sit in the back row and were all bad students. Now, that by Ziyue had displayed his talent, he actually had a certain level of confidence. Even without Sun Nong's recommendation, he could still get to know the big shots in the sect through Uncle Ming and be promoted to an inner apprentice. However, Uncle Ming needed to be escorted, and his return time was uncertain. Plus, the appearance of the mysterious evil cultivator gave him a lot of pressure. He did not want to wait any longer. Of course, with your talent, I believe no one will look down on you. I can vouch for you to be promoted to an inner apprentice and enjoy the same treatment as other inner apprentices. In fact, I can even sponsor you so that you can grow even faster. At this point, Ho Lin Kuan paused. His tone was sincere and full of temptation. Bai Ziyue looked tempted at the right time, but his heart was calm. He was not a child. He knew that everything had a price. Behind all this good news, there must be a condition. As expected, however, If there's a price, there must be a return. In the end, I'm a businessman. A businessman pays attention to benefits. Ho Lin Kuan continued. What do you want? Ziyue's heart tightened as he spoke with a solemn expression. Don't worry. Although your talent is not bad, and even in Wujiang County, you are still too weak. You won't be of any help to me at all. What I want is your future. You just have to understand that you owe me. Ho Lin Kuan said with a smile. All right, I agree. Bai Ziyue pondered for a moment before he nodded and said. In fact, he knew very well that people like old Mr. Ho, who didn't ask for anything and only invested in the future, were seeking the greatest benefits. However, just as he said, he was a businessman who cared about profits. Ziyue also weighed the pros and cons. What did he have now? Talent. This was what he was relying on, but it was impossible for it to be converted into actual combat power in a short period of time. The other party had also clearly stated that they did not need his help for the time being. However, he needed to become an inner sect disciple, and he needed old Mr. Ho's help. More importantly, he needed the help of the Scorching Sun gang to fend off the evil cultivators who might appear. As for relying on Uncle Ming to find other big shots in the gang, he would just have to go through the same treatment again. Perhaps the conditions would be even harsher. Therefore, Ziyue agreed without much hesitation. Good, a smart choice. Ho Lin Kuan laughed and said, In this case, you are considered one of us. I have never been stingy with my own people. How about this? You can go to the Pearl restaurant every month and ask Manager Lee for 5 taels of silver as your living expenses. I will explain it to him. Also, since you've already cultivated the meditative stance to the small success stage, you can choose a martial technique to cultivate. I have a book called The Straight Word Punch here. It's a little special. You can cultivate it first. As for the inner sect matters, I will ask Steward Su to take you there later. Don't worry. When Ziyue returned to the Pearl restaurant, he was still a little absent-minded. A few hours ago, he was just an ordinary chore apprentice. Every day, he would wake up early and sleep late. His cultivation time had to be calculated before he could calculate it. Now, he had become an inner sect apprentice. Not only did he have a master to guide him in cultivating martial techniques, but he also had meat for every meal to replenish his nutrients. Every month, he would even be given vitality pills to nourish his body. Also, other than being an inner sect apprentice, I have also received 2 martial techniques today. Ziyue had mixed feelings. One of them was Sun Ning's 18 consecutive strikes, and the other was the straight word connecting fist that old Mr. Ho had bestowed upon him. He had already learned the 18 consecutive moves. As long as he practiced more, he would be able to reach the entry level. As for the straight punch, Bai Ziyue touched the thin manual on his chest. He planned to read through it tonight and memorize how to use the moves, especially the way to circulate the force before doing anything else. It's a pity that I might not have the chance to go to the slaughterhouse to obtain soul power in the future. Bai Ziyue let out a sigh of regret. Stabilizing more than 30 points of soul power every day was a great help to him. However, this was a trade-off between gains and losses. Although he was regretful, he would not let his personal feelings get the better of him. As soon as he stepped into the Pearl restaurant, Bai Ziyue immediately noticed that everyone in the restaurant, including Manager Lee, looked at him in a different way. Ziyue, are you really an inner sect apprentice? Li Erga thought that he was the closest to Ziyue. He was the first to recover from his shock and asked impatiently. That's right. I'm here to collect my luggage. Ziyue nodded and said. Previously, when he followed Steward Su, not only did he manage to get an inner sect apprentice certificate, but he was also allocated a room. With Steward Su's help, he did not receive any difficulties this time, especially when he displayed his initial success in the meditation stance. Compared to the time when he entered the Scorching Sun gang, the steward in charge of the assessment allocation looked as if he had seen a ghost. This made him secretly happy. You and Uncle Sun have really soared to the sky this time. Seeing Ziyue admit it, a chore apprentice next to him also showed an envious look. Long before Ziyue, Sun Nong had already moved to the Pearl restaurant and moved out of the back room. It was said that he was going to be the head shopkeeper of the rice shop owned by old Mr. Ho. This immediately caused a stir in the restaurant. Even the head chef, Master Zhang, who had a high status in the kitchen, rarely said a few personal words to Sun Known. The treatment could be said to be very different. Now, Ziyue was the same. He also had a leapfrog development. How could they not be envious and even jealous? Of course, I already knew that Mount Ziyue would be rich sooner or later. He is so diligent in his cultivation. It's normal for him to be valued and appreciated by old Mr. Ho. As Li Ergu spoke, he said to Bai Ziyue with a perturbed expression, "Will you forget me in the future?" "How could I?" Ziyue laughed and shook his head. Chapter 30. That's good, that's good. When you achieve more in the future, I can also brag to others that I not only know you, but also slept in the same bed with you. Ha! By then, who will dare to look down on me? Li Ergu was overjoyed, and his face was full of excitement. Ziyue's face stiffened, and he said faintly, "We slept in separate beds." "It's the same. Before you came, I also slept in your bed." Li Ergu had a disapproving look on his face. Then, his eyes lit up and he was eager to try. He said, "By the way, after you leave, I must move to the bed where you were sleeping right away. Maybe there will be a change of fortune for me." Ziyue decided to give up discussing this issue with him. "Well, don't you have to work?" Just at this moment, Manager Li reprimanded. After Li Ergu and others left, he said to Ziyue with a smile, "Old Mr. Ho has sent someone to talk about you. This is your allowance for a month, and the extra is a little compensation from me. And here is your monthly living expenses. In the first month, old Mr. Ho specially asked to give you more, so I decided to give you 3 times 15 taels." As Manager Li spoke, he handed 2 money bags to Ziyue. "Thank you, Manager." Ziyue took a deep breath and reached out to take it. 15 taels of silver plus the allowance. Ziyue looked at it. 3 taels of silver, which was 10 times his allowance, and a total of 18 taels of silver. This was definitely a huge sum of money for him. He still remembered that his mother worked hard for 2 months to make the soles of shoes, but only got 3 coins of silver, and in the end, she gave it all to him. And 18 taels of silver was 60 times of 3 coins of silver. This is what I should do. Maybe in the future, we will need your help. Manager Li did not dare to put on airs, so he said quickly. Ziyue didn't say anything more after a few polite words. After bidding farewell to Manager Li, he stepped into the backyard of the Pearl restaurant. In the room, Ziyue didn't have many things to pack. After becoming an inner court apprentice, he even had a change of clothes. He only picked up a few casual clothes and some small daily necessities. Finally, he took out a cloth bag from under the bed. Inside the cloth bag were the Immortal Cultivation Technique, Purple Chi Divine Visualization Technique, and the Talisman Creation Technique, 100 Talisman Catalog. Now that I finally have money on me, perhaps I can start researching this 100 Talisman Catalog. Thinking about the huge sum of 18 silver taels in the pouch, Ziyue couldn't help but have some thoughts. There were many talisman charms recorded in the 100 Talisman Catalog, and he was very envious of them. It was just that he had been suffering from a shameful lack of funds before, so he temporarily gave up on practicing. Although 18 taels of silver was still not enough to craft talismans, it was enough to start making some preparations. There's no need to rush. What's more important is to master the 18 consecutive saber strikes and the single character linking fist to initiate. Otherwise, if my strength is too low, I won't feel confident. Thinking about the 2 people that his aunt mentioned in the morning, Ziyue's eyes flashed with a trace of worry. He didn't have any hope, because this was often a matter of life and death. Fortunately, he had specially reminded his aunt to temporarily go to the countryside to avoid disaster. Otherwise, he would be even more worried. On the other side, Bai Ernie didn't take Ziyue's reminder to heart. But after all, she had just bought a rooster and a flock of chicks that she needed to constantly feed. She wasn't willing to give them up, so she didn't leave. Instead, she bought a small bag of rice bran from the market, intending to use it as food for the chicks. Just as she was about to return, she coincidentally met Old Hong's wife, who lived not far from her house. She was about the same age as her, but her body was more robust. When she saw Bai Erniu, she greeted her and said, "Pan family sister-in-law, what did you buy?" As she spoke, she glanced at the bag and saw that it was rice bran, so she lost her curiosity. She knew that Bai Erniu had recently raised a group of chicks, and she was quite concerned about it. She spent most of the day on it. However, what she cared about was not what Bai Erniu bought. So she quickly said, "Pan family sister-in-law, didn't you say last time that your family's Yume was haunted and it was beaten away by your nephew? It seems that after you said that, the ghost didn't come again. I just met two people who were about to ask about the ghost, and they said that they were willing to pay for it. I thought that your nephew might really have some skills, so I told them about it. When your nephew makes money, he will have to thank me for introducing him." Bai Erniu's heart skipped a beat. She suddenly remembered that she couldn't help bragging to Old Hong's wife, whose son also met a ghost. The other party didn't believe her at that time, so she was a little unwilling. Now that she thought about it, she suddenly broke out in a cold sweat. "When did those two people ask you?" Bai Erniu hurriedly asked. "Just a while ago, when I was measuring the fabric in Linchwayer's place. I happened to hear them asking someone else, so I said a few words. I guess they will come to your house in the evening to invite people," Old Hong's wife said with excitement. "You talkative woman." Bai Erniu's face changed greatly, and she quickly ran home. Thinking of her nephew's deliberate reminder before, how could she not know that trouble was about to come? She even guessed that her nephew had not only chased the ghost away, but had also killed it. Although she didn't know where her nephew got that ability, but now it was obvious that the ghost owner came to her door. What kind of people could raise ghosts? And what the ghost did before was harmful. She didn't read any books, but she heard a lot of strange stories from the mouth of the old people. There were even some legends of evil cultivators raising ghosts. How could she dare to bet on the other party's idea? Near home, she happened to see two young people who were asking an old woman for directions. The address they gave was her home address. There was no longer any hope in her heart. She quickly ran home from the path, ignoring her daughter's doubts, picked her up, and ran, deliberately avoiding the place where she might meet the two people. Bai Erniu suddenly felt a little confused. What should I do next? First go to Mount Ziyue and tell him, and then go to find the child's father. This family still depends on him. Making up her mind, Bai Erniu quickly identified the direction and ran to the Pearl Restaurant. Coincidentally, when Bai Erniu just arrived at the door of the Pearl Restaurant, Ziyue just happened to pack up his things and come out. Mount Ziyue may really have an accident. As soon as they met, Bai Erniu said with an anxious face. Shortly after Bai Erniu left the house, two young people walked all the way to her door. They knocked on the door, and with a creak, the door was open and not locked. It was Bai Erniu who left in a hurry and forgot to close the door. They looked at each other and walked in without hesitation. Chapter 31. Scorching Sun Gang Branch Division. Under the cover of night. Ziyue placed his luggage at the head of his bed. The joy of being promoted to an inner disciple and learning 2 martial arts techniques had disappeared. Instead, his face looked somewhat serious. The news he got from his aunt really made him feel uneasy. Luckily, my aunt has already left, and I've also entered the Scorching Sun Gang Branch Division. Even if that evil ghost cultivator knows that I killed the female ghost, he probably won't dare to act rashly in the short term. Very quickly, Ziyue regained his composure. Now that his aunt had left, the pressure on him lessened a lot, and he didn't have to worry too much. Especially when his aunt left, she brought along the 10 taels of silver that he sent to his parents. Now, even if something happened to him, their lives would have a certain degree of security. Of course, the Scorching Sun Gang Branch Division was naturally an extremely safe place. Their strength was definitely one of the best in Qinghetown. Ignoring the internal and external training martial artists, there were many internal training martial artists in the gang. There were even people who had cultivated inner chi. In terms of the number of martial artists, they might even be more powerful than the Qinghetown government. Even if that evil ghost cultivator was an immortal cultivator, his strength wouldn't be too strong. Otherwise, he wouldn't have disappeared when the government was investigating the case. Now that the news had passed, he revealed himself. Therefore, Ziyue judged that he should be safe in the Scorching Sun Gang Branch Division. However, this kind of safety is only temporary. I can't stay in the branch division forever. I still have to rely on myself for everything. If I'm strong enough, even if that evil ghost cultivator comes looking for me, I won't have to be afraid. Ziyue took a deep breath. Under the pressure of the crisis, his thirst for strength grew even stronger. Without thinking too much, Ziyue took out a thin book from his chest. Straight Through Fist. This book was none other than the single-character linking fist that he had obtained from old Mr. Ho. Ziyue used the light of the oil lamp to open the book and read it word by word. At this moment, the benefits of self-learning were fully displayed. Other than a few words that were still unfamiliar to him, he was able to read through the entire word linking fist without any hindrance. Even though the straight linking fist is a type of fist technique, it's actually more of a method to consolidate one's strength. Even if a normal martial artist could cultivate force through the Diana stance and other stances, the power they could unleash was limited. This kind of force was scattered. On the other hand, the single-character link fist is able to gradually condense these forces and twist them into one. When all the forces are linked together and released in one go, it will immediately be able to display an even stronger might. Ziyue closed the secret manual and pondered silently. This fist technique's method of exerting strength was quite different from the 18 consecutive strikes method of exerting strength. The 18 consecutive strikes mainly focused on the arms and waist. On the other hand, the single-character linking fist was a technique that combined all of the strength in one's body. Comparing the two, the single-character linking fist was naturally superior. The entire fist technique focuses on the circulation of force, but the moves are rather simple. There's only a twisting and punching posture. However, it's precisely because it's a method of circulating force that the difficulty of cultivating this fist technique is higher than normal martial arts techniques. Ziyue tried to circulate the force in his body according to the method of circulating force in the fist technique. He twisted his body and punched out. Whoosh! Only the wind from the punch blew. The force of the punch had already dissipated the moment it was circulated and could not be transmitted to the arm. It's indeed a little difficult. To circulate the force, one must first be able to control the blood flow in one's body freely. Even though I've already perfected the Diana stance, and it's not too difficult to circulate the blood flow, it's still difficult to combine the force and condense it into one. Ziyue sighed. When the Diana stance was perfected, it was not difficult to generate the force, but it was difficult to extend the force. For example, if he were to control the force in his legs, extend it to his body, and then release it from his arms, because it had to travel a long distance with countless blood vessels, the force would unknowingly dissipate. As such, the force that was released in the end would naturally be weak and have no power. Ziyue could control the force and pierce through a piece of paper with a distance of 10 centimeters. The force that was released was actually just the force derived from his arms. Any further, and the force would disperse. As expected, it's equally difficult to reach the entry level of martial arts techniques and unleash its power. However, no matter how difficult it is, I must master it. Ziyue sighed in his heart, but a fighting spirit suddenly appeared in his heart. After all, he still had an advantage. The perfected Diana stance allowed his force and control of the blood in his body to far surpass that of cultivators who had only achieved initial mastery of the Diana stance. In terms of congenital mastery, he was already ahead of other people who cultivated martial arts techniques. Ziyue suddenly did not care about the time he used the technique and strove to transmit the force completely to his arms. Then, according to the method of circulating the force, he slowly accumulated the force from his legs to his crotch. The dispersed blood immediately caused the force to disperse by more than half, but he did not relax. He continued to control the force, slowly moving it up his body. As the blood flowed, it seemed to emit a splashing sound, bringing a strong force to his shoulders. Ziyue's shoulders suddenly turned from red to purple. The surging blood carried a strong force, like a hot knife through butter, quickly flowing from his arms to his eyes and then out. Involuntarily, Ziyue punched out. Puff! The sound of the force exploding was heard. The air in front of Ziyue's fist emitted a white mist, blowing the paper window far away, causing it to tremble. So tired, Ziyue was sweating profusely, feeling that his physical strength had been greatly depleted. Especially his arms, they were sore and swollen, as if it was difficult to even lift them. After a while, he finally calmed down. This punch, I could be considered to have punched out, but it was not complete, because when it reached my arms, I had already lost control of the force. I could only use the force of the force to punch out. Also, my body is still too weak. I can't bear such a strong force. Stretching out his sleeves, looking at his arm that was still red and swollen, Ziyue could not help but bitterly shake his head. The power of this punch was indeed not bad, at least twice as strong as his previous full-force attack. But the time spent in the middle to transfer the force was too long. It took a whole 10 seconds. Others could not possibly stand there and wait for 10 seconds before punching out. Not to mention, after this punch, he could be considered to be half crippled. His arm could not bear it. Maybe it's because my control of the force is too strong. Normally, those who have practiced the Diana stance to the small success level, their control of the force is much weaker than mine. The force of driving the flow of qi and blood is naturally smaller. If they were to use it completely, even if the force of the force is strong, they would not hurt their arms like I did. And some warriors who have also practiced the Diana stance to the great perfection level, they must have already started the outer forging training. The strength of their bodies is also much stronger than mine, so naturally they would not have this kind of trouble. Ziyue sighed in his heart, suddenly understanding the crux of the problem. The force he controlled was too strong, and the strength of his body could not keep up, resulting in this result. Chapter 32. I need to change my train of thought. I can't do it all at once like just now. By Ziyue's mind spun, and he quickly came up with a solution. There were countless blood vessels in the human body, and they were scattered in every corner of the body. If he did it all at once, and transferred it to his arm step by step, his strength would become stronger. However, if the pressure was too strong, it might explode his blood vessels and cause unimaginable consequences. Therefore, he decided to disperse the pressure and only integrate the force from his aorta. In this way, the pressure would be small and he would not be injured. After performing it completely, his strength would be even stronger. When he thought of it, he did it. When his physical strength gradually recovered and his swollen arm was washed by the force, Ziyue started practicing again. Twisting body punch. Puff. A crisp sound of fist force could be heard, and a wave of air could be seen rushing out. It's still a little strong, but it's still acceptable. Ziyue frowned. He still felt some swelling pain in his arm, but it was not as scary as the first time. Moreover, this time, the time it took him to adjust his strength was greatly reduced. It only took him 6 seconds. He believed that as he became more familiar with this fist technique, he would be able to reduce the time needed to adjust his force. The only thing that gave him a headache was that he used up too much of his physical strength. Every time he exerted force, a large portion of his physical strength would be consumed. After only a few practice sessions, he felt that his physical strength was exhausted, and his stomach was also feeling hungry. Ziyue had no choice but to stop practicing. Name: Ziyue strength. 1. 93. Cannot be improved. Speed. 1. 85. Cannot be improved. Physique. 2. 01. Cannot be improved. Spirit. 1. 80. Cannot be improved. Martial arts. Perfect meditation stance. Cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes. Not learned. Cannot be improved. Straight punch. Not learned. Cannot be improved. Immortal arts. Purple chi divine observation technique. Not learned. Cannot be improved. Spiritual energy. 1237 inches expected. It's impossible to reach the beginner level with just a short period of practice. Looking at his stats, Ziyue could not help but lie down on the bed and fall asleep. The next day, Ziyue woke up naturally before dawn. The habits he had developed in the Bright Pearl restaurant could not be changed in a short period of time. Of course, Ziyue had never thought of changing. Waking up early wasn't a bad thing. Since he was already awake, he didn't want to stay in bed, so he got up. After washing up, Ziyue arrived at the martial arts practice field. Returning to his old place, Ziyue's mood was completely different. Regardless of whether it was in terms of strength or status, he had changed enormously compared to before. At this time, there was no one in the training field. Ziyue went directly to the weapon rack and pulled out a hardwood saber. 18 consecutive strikes. Ziyue immediately started practicing. Compared to the strenuous straight connecting fist, Ziyue felt a sense of exhilaration when he executed the 18 consecutive slashes. Slash after slash, slash after slash. Although there were times when his speed was too fast and there were some mistakes in the circulation of his force, the momentum of each strike made him feel carefree and unrestrained. Quick, quick, quick. In the dark night, the hardwood saber was executed by him like a mirage. As the force was transmitted, the saber slashed at empty space, producing swishing sound from time to time. Soon, he finished executing the 18 consecutive slashes. Ziyue exhaled softly, a strange expression on his face. It seems that executing the 18 consecutive slashes this time is much easier than yesterday. The circulation of force also seems to have become smoother and more powerful. Ziyue was a little puzzled. Then, he thought of the straight connecting fist that he had practiced yesterday. Could it be? Ziyue's heart skipped a beat. He had a vague guess. The straight connecting fist was a method of regulating one's force. Although he had not reached the entry level, after yesterday's practice, his control of his force had naturally improved. Now, when he executed the 18 consecutive slashes, it was less difficult to execute. No wonder when old Mr. Ho gave me this secret manual yesterday, he said that this martial technique was a little special. So this is the reason why it's special. If that's the case, the straight connecting fist actually has a certain amplification effect on the cultivation of other martial techniques. If I can cultivate this straight connecting fist to the entry level, or even to the level of minor accomplishment, wouldn't it greatly increase the speed of my cultivation of other martial techniques? Ziyue could not help but feel excited. All along, the only thing that restricted him in the attribute panel, other than his spirit energy, was the time required to reach the entry level. Compared to others, he did not have much of an advantage when it came to reaching the entry level of a martial technique or cultivation technique. If he could rely on the straight connecting fist to increase the time required to reach the entry level of other martial techniques, it would definitely increase his strength faster. Thus, Ziyue quickly stopped practicing the 18 consecutive slashes and switched to practicing the straight connecting fist. Twisting body punch. Puff. The force sprayed out, producing a crisp sound in the air. This won't do. It's too exhausting. If I keep executing it with my stamina, I can only execute 5 punches at most. Feeling the exhaustion of his stamina, Ziyue could not take it anymore and quickly changed his train of thought. Following which, Ziyue once again controlled the flow of force in his body. Finally, he stopped punching. Instead, he gradually relaxed the force around his arm, slowly dispersing the force. Twisting body punch. When he punched out, it seemed as light as a feather. However, there was force circulating in his body. Ziyue's eyes faintly lit up. He suddenly realized that by gathering and dispersing the force, he had a better understanding of the changes in force. His control over his strength had also been strengthened. Again, every time Ziyue gathered the force, it took him 6 to 10 seconds. However, dispersing the force took even longer. This was because the reverse flow of qi and blood was extremely harmful to the body. However, Ziyue enjoyed it. This was because when dispersing the force, the flow of qi and blood would cause a change in the force, allowing him to deepen his control of the force. 1 punch, 2 punches, 3 punches, Ziyue gradually immersed himself in it. It was as if he could not feel the passage of time. until he suddenly heard footsteps approaching from afar. "It's him." Ziyue turned around and looked at the person who had come. He was surprised. He knew this person. It was the person who had guided him to practice the Diana stance when he first came to the martial arts practice field. If you remember correctly, this person's name seemed to be Qin Xiaoping. When he saw Ziyue practicing martial arts in the martial arts practice field, Qin Xiaoping was also surprised. For a long time, he had been the first to come to the martial arts practice field. It was only after 3 in the morning that people gradually came. He did not expect that there would be someone who came earlier than him. Chapter 33. Good morning, Senior Apprentice Brother Qin. Ziyue greeted him with a smile. Hello. Qin Xiaoping nodded slightly. He had long since forgotten who Ziyue was. He only responded with a greeting and stood up in a familiar corner. Ziyue wasn't surprised by this. They hadn't seen each other for almost 2 months. It was normal for him to not remember him. Looking at Qin Xiaoping's stance, Ziyue raised his eyebrows and revealed a trace of surprise. When Qin Xiaoping stood up, the frequency of his body's undulations and contortions was much less than 2 months ago. The range of his movements was also relatively smaller. As someone who had long since practiced the Diana stance to perfection, he naturally understood that this was a symptom of beginning to withdraw one's strength after reaching the later stages of initial success in the stance. Once the withdrawal of strength was complete and the stance remained motionless, it meant that the Diana stance had reached great success. When a strength was agitated like a mouse scurrying about, one could begin to practice external tempering techniques. I heard that Senior Apprentice Brother Qin only entered the Scorching Sun Gang for half a year. Similarly, he only took 5 days to enter the sect, but he reached great success in the Diana stance in 50 or so days. On the same day, he was valued by the head of the disciplinary hall and was accepted as a disciple. Looking at the situation now, I estimate that he will reach great success in the Diana stance in a few months. To reach great success in the Diana stance in a year, this speed is even faster than Zhao Gongyi's. Ziyue immediately came to a conclusion. Zhao Gongyi was currently the most talented member of the Scorching Sun Gang in Qingatown. He was 15 years old and had long since begun practicing external tempering techniques. However, he had also spent a year to reach great success in the Diana stance. As for Qin Xiaoping, in Ziyue's opinion, he would be able to reach great success in 3 or 4 months at most. Including the time he had spent practicing before, he would only need 10 months in total. However, this is normal. Although talent is important, so is diligence. Senior Apprentice Brother Qin's diligence in practicing is obvious to all. Naturally, he would be able to reach great success in the Diana stance faster. Ziyue had long known that talent was not absolute. Hard work was equally important. How many amazing geniuses had become mediocre because they didn't work hard enough? It wasn't impossible for those who were well prepared to make it to the top. Not to mention, Qin Xiaoping's talent was not weak. Since Senior Brother Qin only needed 10 months to reach greater mastery of the meditative stance, with the talent that I have shown that I am more talented than him, it would be most appropriate for me to break through in 9 or even 8 months. At this rate, we still need half a year. Ziyue muttered in his heart. He still felt that it was a little slow. Even in the eyes of the bystanders, it was already shocking and enviable that he could cultivate the Diana stance to great success in 8 months. However, he had already used his spiritual energy to raise the meditative stance to perfection. In a situation where he could not raise it any further, he was naturally unwilling to wait for another half a year. Previously, I already knew about the news of an external forging cultivation method. I wanted to take the opportunity to go there and see if I had a chance to seize it. But now that there are evil ghost cultivators eyeing covetously outside, it would be very dangerous to act rashly. Ziyue started practicing the straight punch again as he pondered silently. Previously, when he was an apprentice in the Bright Pearl restaurant, he had heard a group of people discussing when he was serving the private room on the 2nd floor. The other party saw that he was a child, so they did not hold back and allowed him to listen to the whole thing. From their discussion, Ziyue learned that in the Qingshui Bay that connected the Qinghe town and the Wu River, there was a group of water bandits. Among them, there was a water bandit named Old Sixth Lu who betrayed them for unknown reasons. He even stole the level 5 golden body of an external forging cultivation method of the head of the water bandits, nicknamed the Water Immortal. Now, he was hiding in Qinghe town. Perhaps because he was afraid of being hunted down, it was said that Old Sixth Lu secretly contacted the Wu Wei escort agency and wanted them to escort him away. Even if he knew about it, it would be very unlikely for him to obtain the level 5 golden body of an external forging cultivation method. However, he was still tempted. Let's wait a little longer. Anyway, there's still a few days. Suppressing his thoughts, Ziyue finally abandoned all distracting thoughts and immersed himself in cultivation again. Winter came and the cold wind blew. Sometimes it was rare to see the sun for the whole day. Today was the case. The gloomy weather made the early morning light seem a little dim. At this time, Qin Xiaoping had already stopped his movements. He walked over hesitantly and said, "You should be the apprentice Yue who cultivated the Diana stance to the small success level in 40 days, right?" Obviously, the news of Ziyue cultivating the Diana stance to the small success level in 40 days had gradually spread. That's right. Ziyue nodded and slowly dispersed the force in his fist. Then, he said, "Senior Brother Qin, we have met before. Thank you for your guidance. I remember now. You are the first person to wake up earlier than me in a long time. Although I don't know how you became an apprentice with your talent, I believe that very soon someone will come knocking on your door and take you as a disciple. Who knows, we might even become fellow apprentices." Qin Xiaoping's face revealed a look of understanding as he continued to speak with a smile. "Take me as a disciple, brother or sister?" Ziyue's heart skipped a beat as he pretended to be puzzled and asked. He had long heard that some of the outstanding inter-sect apprentices would be directly taken as disciples by the supervisors of the various branches in the sect. The weakest of these supervisors was a powerhouse at the peak of the inner refinement realm. Only they were qualified to take people as disciples. The moment he became an inter-sect apprentice, he actually had such expectations. Now that he had received confirmation from Senior Brother Qin, he could not help but feel excited. Talent is extremely important in a warrior's cultivation. Why does the sect divide apprentices into 3 categories? Apprentices, outer sect apprentices, and inner sect apprentices. It is to select warriors with outstanding talent. You only took 40 days to reach the initial success stage of the Diana stance. This is already proof of your talent. Not to mention that you are a servant apprentice. You have countless things to do every day, so you don't have much time to cultivate. I estimate that not only will the supervisors be tempted to take you as a disciple, but even the left and right guardians of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch, and even the sect leader will be tempted. Qin Xiaoping said with a solemn face. The left and right guardians and the sect leader are all powerhouses who have cultivated inner qi. They're all busy with their own affairs, so they probably don't have time to care about this. Ziyue's eyes flashed as he shook his head and said, "That's true. The left guardian has already taken Senior Brother Zhao Gongyi as a disciple, but the sect leader and the right guardian have not been planning to take anyone as a disciple in recent years." Qin Xiaoping nodded, then changed the topic and said, "However, if a supervisor wants to take you as a disciple, I think you should also consider it carefully. That's because there are differences between supervisors." "What do you mean?" Ziyue hurriedly asked. Chapter 34. The Scorching Sun Gang branch has a total of 5 supervisors. They are the field supervisor Yin Jixing, the internal supervisor Lu Yanhong, the water supervisor Guoliang, the mining supervisor Qin Yu, and the law enforcement supervisor Tan Xiaofan, who is also my master. Although the 5 supervisors are all martial artists at the peak of the internal refinement stage, my master is the strongest in terms of strength. His 7-star whip can hit anything within 10 meters with unparalleled power. He is also known as the #1 internal refinement stage martial artist in Qinghe Town. He can contend with martial artists who have cultivated internal chi. Next is the mining supervisor Chinyu. His swordsmanship is extraordinary, and he once killed 3 internal refinement stage martial artists in 3 moves. If these 2 supervisors want to take you as a disciple, you can just choose according to your own thoughts. But the other 3 aren't known for their strength, so they really aren't the best choice. Qin Xiaoping's tone was calm and confident, as if he was passing judgment on everything. Zue silently nodded, his face thoughtful. He naturally believed Qin Xiaoping's words. The law enforcement supervisor Tan Xiaofan's strength must be the strongest among all the supervisors. Secondly, the mining supervisor Qin Yu's strength shouldn't be weak either. But if it was said that strength was the most suitable choice for his master, he had a different opinion. In a situation where the strength of the supervisors wasn't weak, there was a huge difference between those who were good at teaching and those who weren't. Of course, to Ziyue, these weren't important. What he cared about was martial arts and martial techniques. Unknowingly, the sky was already bright, and the number of apprentices in the practice field gradually increased. After a morning of practice, Ziyue's stomach was already rumbling with hunger, so he didn't stay any longer and went straight to the cafeteria. The difference in status and treatment made his breakfast much richer. A big bowl of rice porridge, 3 meat buns, 2 fried dough sticks, a bowl of meat soup, and a small dish of pickled vegetables. It was at least the richest breakfast he had eaten in the past 2 months. After stuffing everything into his stomach, Ziyue finally felt full and walked out of the cafeteria. In the scorching sun gang branch, apprentices were only allowed to move around in the backyard. In the morning, he spent most of his time in the martial arts practice field. To an apprentice, the only thing they could cultivate was the dhyana stance. At most, some apprentices could cultivate the dhyana stance to a small success and choose a martial technique to cultivate. As for the afternoon, the sect arranged for a private tutor to teach them how to read and write. It wasn't something that could be easily understood, but something that could be read and written. Of course, it was up to him whether he wanted to learn or not. The sect did not force him. They practiced martial arts in the morning, and Ziyue went to listen to a class in the afternoon. He found that there were only about 10 apprentices, including Qin Xiaoping, whom he had met early in the morning. They nodded to each other as a greeting and then sat down at an empty table. Soon, the private school teacher arrived. He was a thin, middle-aged man with a mustache. He looked a little old-fashioned. He turned a blind eye to the fact that there were over 100 apprentices, but only a dozen or so had come class. Naturally, he began his lecture. Soon, Ziyue lost interest. What the tutor taught were all words that he had already mastered. In addition, the tutor's lecture was dull and boring. After that, he never came again. For the next 3 days, Ziyue spent most of his time practicing the straight punch. At this moment, he was very familiar with the changes in the flow of force. He was also very familiar with the control of force. With the straight punch, he twisted his body and punched out. In just 3 seconds, the force of the fist went from his legs to his waist and rushed into his arms. He punched out. Bam! The force surged, and a faint fist imprint appeared on one of the wooden stakes. The power of this punch was already beginning to show. Moreover, Ziyue subconsciously glanced at his status panel. Name: Ziyue Strength 1, 95, cannot be improved. Speed 1, 85, cannot be improved. Physique 2, 01, cannot be improved. Mentality 1, 80, cannot be improved. Martial arts, complete dhyana stance, cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes, not initiated, cannot be improved. Straight punch can be improved. Immortal technique, purple chi visualization technique, not initiated, cannot be improved. Soul energy, 1237-inch, finally initiated. Ziyue's breathing was a little hurried. After 3 days of hard work, almost without rest, he finally reached the beginner level of the straight punch. He even noticed that because of the hard work in the past few days, his strength had a slight improvement. He was 1 step closer to the 2 mark. Consume 300 soul energy to upgrade straight punch to minor accomplishment. Ziyue frowned. Although it was also upgraded to minor accomplishment, the straight punch consumed 100 more soul energy than the Diana stance. Clearly, as one's martial skill and cultivation method became stronger, the amount of spiritual energy required to advance to minor accomplishment, great accomplishment, and great accomplishment would also increase. Upgrade. Even so, he still chose to upgrade it without hesitation. Wang, by Ziyue, was in a trance for a moment. Then, he felt his body heating up. It was as if he had gone through countless hours of bitter cultivation at this moment. His understanding and comprehension of the straight punch had reached an astonishing level. After a while, Bai Ziyue finally calmed down. Then he realized that his straight word linking fist had reached the small success stage. Consume 600 soul energy to upgrade straight punch to great mastery. Ziyue hesitated for a moment, but still chose to upgrade it. He knew the importance of controlling his strength. It would be of great help to him when he cultivated other martial arts techniques in the future. His mind was in a trance again. When he woke up again, he was able to control his strength. Although he couldn't say that he knew it like the back of his hand, he could command it like an extension of his arm. Ziyue didn't even use any moves. He just stood there. Bang! With a crisp sound, the hard rock under his feet was directly crushed by him, and cracks began to appear on it. Then, what made Ziyue feel awkward was that the soles of his shoes were broken. The cold wind blew, causing the soles of his feet to feel cold. Since the straight punch has reached great accomplishment, my control over my strength has reached the peak. If I were to cultivate the 18 consecutive strikes in my current state, it wouldn't take long for me to reach minor accomplishment. Ziyue thought to himself as he walked to his room. With his current level of control over his strength, he only needed to familiarize himself with martial arts techniques like the 18 consecutive strikes. It would be much easier to cultivate compared to before. It wasn't difficult to reach minor accomplishment. However, very quickly, a trace of gloominess appeared on his face. 3 days had passed, but no supervisor came to him to take him in as a disciple. Even though he didn't care as much about this as the other apprentices, he was still worried. He even had some bad guesses. Chapter 35. For the past few days, even though Bai Ziyue had been cultivating quietly every day, he didn't show off. However, due to his experience of being promoted from a chores apprentice to an inner apprentice, as well as his amazing talent in cultivating the Diana stance to initial success in 40 days, he naturally attracted the attention of all the apprentices. These days, there was no lack of people who deliberately tried to befriend him. However, as time passed, there was still no supervisor who wanted to take him in as a disciple, and some bad rumors gradually spread. Ziyue's eyes and ears were sharp, so he naturally knew about these rumors. He also had doubts in his heart, wondering if Zhang Bo, the logistics supervisor, was behind this. However, he quickly dismissed this idea. Zhang Bo, the logistics supervisor, might be a big shot in the eyes of these apprentices, but it was impossible for him to influence the 5 supervisors who were at the peak of inner refinement. No matter what the outside world is like, I just have to cultivate according to the department schedule. I don't have to care about the outside world. No matter how bad it is, it can't be worse than the chores apprentice incident. Ziyue had a calm temperament. He might have been a little irritated at first, but he quickly suppressed it. Now that he had cultivated the straight punch to advanced success, he could be considered to have a preliminary combat ability. Next, as long as he cultivated the 18 consecutive strikes to initial success, his combat ability would immediately soar. At that time, he would have the strength to fight for the next operation. That's right, after a few days of thinking, he finally decided to give it a try and obtain the Stage 5 Golden Body. Half a year's time was still too long for him. In addition, there was a heretic ghost-rearing sorcerer watching him covetously. He really did not feel safe. Only by increasing his strength as much as possible, he was confident that he could survive in this dangerous world. As such, there were some opportunities that he could not miss. According to the news I heard, the Wuwei escort agency will depart tomorrow morning. That 6th Lu will probably depart with this escort agency. Therefore, I need to cultivate the 18 consecutive strikes to initial success before tonight and add some skills. After returning to his residence, Ziyue did not return to the training field. He took out the rusty pig slaughtering knife and walked directly to the door of his room. He started cultivating in a small courtyard. 18 consecutive saber strikes, one saber strike after another. The flow of energy was complex and ever-changing. But as Ziyue cultivated the straight linking fist to greater mastery, he was extremely familiar with the integration and changes of force. At this moment, he finally felt a sense of ease and contentment when using the saber technique. Once, twice, thrice, Ziyue seemed to be tireless as he continued to cultivate. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, the sky gradually darkened. Many apprentices had already returned to their respective residences. When they saw him practicing martial skills in the courtyard, they couldn't help but reveal a trace of disdain. After all, he had been promoted from a chores apprentice. So what if he worked hard? After the 5 years of apprenticeship was up, wouldn't he be the same as them and become an ordinary inner disciple? This status was not low at all. It would definitely make countless people envious. However, he had shown that he was even more talented than senior brother Zhao Gongyi. The difference in treatment was too great. It's a pity, but no supervisor is willing to accept him as a disciple. No matter how hard he works, it's useless. Someone sighed, shook his head, and returned to his room. Ziyue turned a deaf ear to this. Of course, even if he heard it, he wouldn't care. Finally, at a certain moment, Bai Ziyue brandished his pig slaughtering knife, and the continuous knife light seemed to cut through the air, emitting a seemingly endless sound of the knife whistling. As the air waves rolled, even the fallen leaves on the ground were blown into the air. Slash! Suddenly, he brandished his pig slaughtering saber. After 18 consecutive saber strikes, the last saber strike landed. Puff! A half-exposed rock was cut into two by his saber, leaving a smooth section the size of a palm. 18 consecutive saber strikes. Beginner level. Ziyue felt extremely carefree. The 18 consecutive saber strikes that would have taken him 1 to 2 weeks to reach beginner level only took him a few hours to reach beginner level. From this, one could see the ingenuity of the single-character linking fist. Name, U.S. Strength, 1. 99, unupgradable. Speed, 1. 85, unupgradable. Physique, 203, unupgradable. Spirit, 1. 80, unupgradable. Martial arts, perfect meditation stance, unupgradable. 18 consecutive saber strikes, beginner level, upgradable. Great mastery of straight linking fist, unupgradable. Immortal arts, purple chi visualization technique, unupgradable. Spirit energy, 337-inch, 18 consecutive saber strikes have indeed reached beginner level and can be upgraded. However, my spirit energy is already insufficient. At most, I can only upgrade the 18 consecutive saber strikes to beginner level. Looking at the status panel, Ziyue sighed slightly. Ever since he became an inner disciple, he still hadn't found a new way to obtain spirit energy. Hence, his spirit energy hadn't increased. Spend 300 spirit energy to upgrade the 18 consecutive saber strikes to beginner level. Upgrade. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue chose to upgrade. In an instant, a large amount of memories related to cultivating the 18 consecutive saber strikes appeared in his mind. His arms, body, and muscles all seemed to have become firmer at this moment. From the looks of it, it seemed to be the result of cultivating the 18 consecutive saber strikes for a long time. 18 consecutive saber strikes, beginner level, and great mastery of straight linking fist. With these two martial arts techniques, I finally have a certain level of combat power. Perhaps I'm still far from being able to compare to Uncle Ming, who is an internal refinement expert. However, I should be able to contend against an external refinement expert. At the very least, I'm confident that I can defeat that ghost head stronghold bandit. Ziyue's physical fitness wasn't bad. His great mastery of the meditation stance was enough to make up for the difference in physical fitness between him and that ghost head stronghold bandit. Back then, the only thing that restricted him was his martial arts techniques. Now that he had two martial arts techniques that he had cultivated to a certain level, his confidence naturally increased greatly. Looking at the sky, Ziyue felt a protest from his stomach. He hurriedly ran to the canteen. After returning to his residence, Ziyue forced himself to lie down on the bed and closed his eyes. Thinking about tomorrow's operation, he was excited, nervous, and excited. All kinds of emotions kept entangling him. He used a much longer time than before to fall asleep. The next morning, Ziyue automatically woke up. He got up, put on his clothes, and walked out of his room to wash up. It seemed that he was no different from his usual self. However, when Ziyue walked out of his room again, the clothes he was wearing had already changed. It was no longer the clothes unique to the inner disciples of the Scorching Sun gang. Instead, it was coarse hemp clothes that belonged to him. Perhaps it was because he had grown taller, but the clothes still seemed a little short. A pig slaughtering knife was stuck at his waist. It was wrapped in black cloth and looked inconspicuous. Slowly, Ziyue walked out of the Scorching Sun gang's branch through the back door. Chapter 36. At the same time, Qin Xiaoping deliberately woke up earlier than usual and hurried to the martial arts practice field. In the past few days, he and Ziyue had a certain level of friendship. After hearing about him from his master yesterday, he naturally couldn't wait to share it with him. No wonder the 5 supervisors didn't open their mouths to accept him as a disciple. It turns out that someone more important has taken a fancy to him. But thinking about it, with Junior Brother's talent, it would be abnormal if he wasn't valued. With him interfering, the 5 supervisors naturally had to give up. Qin Xiaoping walked around the martial arts practice field, feeling happy for Ziyue. Why is he so slow today? He usually comes early, right? Looking at the sky, Qin Xiaoping was a little puzzled. In the past few days, no matter how early he woke up, when he arrived at the martial arts practice field, he would always see Ziyue standing there and beginning to cultivate. However, today it was obviously past the usual cultivation time, but the other party still hadn't appeared. Walking out of the Scorching Sun gang branch, Ziyue looked around calmly. He had always been vigilant against the evil ghost cultivator. Once he discovered something, he would definitely retreat without hesitation and give up on this operation. Fortunately, there was no one around, nor were there any ghosts. Ziyue left quickly. The fastest way to go from Qinghe Town to Wujiang County is naturally by water. It usually takes half a day to reach. However, that 6th Lu offended the Water Immortal, the head of the water bandits. Going by water can only be said to be walking into a trap. Therefore, he will definitely take the land route. Ziyue analyzed in his heart, but his footsteps didn't stop. During the 2 months in the Pearl Restaurant, he had to get up early and go to the slaughterhouse in the dark every day. He had long been used to walking at night, so he was very fast. Soon, he walked out of North Street and gradually came to West Street. In the distance, the city gate of Qinghe Town was in sight. He naturally wouldn't go to the entrance of the Wuwei escort agency to wait. Not only would he be easily discovered, but there was also no need to. Therefore, the path he chose was the path they had to take. From Qinghe Town to Wujiang County, there are a total of 3 roads. One of them was an official road, one was a small road, and the last one was a mountain road. Among these 3 roads, the middle section of the official road is occupied by the Ghost Head Stronghold. It should not be their first choice. The deterrence of the Ghost Head Stronghold in Qinghe Town was still very strong. It was enough to make children stop crying. This time, Old 6th Lu must have taken all his belongings with him when he escaped from Qinghe Town. Once he met the people from Ghost Head Stronghold, he would be skinned alive even if he didn't die. Therefore, Ziyue judged that they would take the other 2 paths. Regardless of whether it was a small road or a mountain road, they would all pass through a place. Oxhead Mountain. Before Ziyue decided to make a move, he had already investigated everything. The small path and a mountain path diverged at the Oxhead Mountain. Therefore, if the water bandit leader, the Water Immortal, wants to kill 6th Lu, she will definitely set up an ambush in the area of Oxhead Mountain. As for me, I need to find a place to hide in the vicinity. Ziyue thought to himself. He had never planned to take the initiative to kill old Sixth Lu. Let's not talk about the other party's strength. If he had the confidence to take on this escort, the Wu-Wei escort agency would definitely send out smart and capable people to ensure that this escort could be completed smoothly. No matter how confident Ziyue was, he didn't dare to clash head-on with the people from the escort agency. There were 3 levels of external forging. External forging of the skin, external forging of the flesh, and external forging of the muscles and bones. Ziyue estimated that he hadn't started external forging yet. He had only cultivated the straight punch to the greater success stage and the 18 consecutive strikes to the lesser success stage. At most, he would be able to contend against a martial artist who had external forged the skin, against a powerhouse who had external forged the flesh, and even external forged the muscles and bones. He would be powerless. Boom! When Ziyue approached the city gate, it happened to open. Outside Qinghe town, there were already some villagers carrying their own fruits and vegetables. They lined up one by one and paid the entrance fee before they could enter. Naturally, they didn't have to pay to leave Qinghe town. At this time, there were actually some people who were in a hurry to leave the town like Ziyue. He joined the crowd and walked out of the city gate inconspicuously. There was a 7 to 8 li official road from Qinghe town to Oxhead Mountain. It was about 10 feet wide and could allow a horse carriage to gallop through. Perhaps it was because of the rain earlier, but there were still some puddles on the road. However, in the cold winter wind, they had already frozen into ice. Occasionally, when he stepped on the ice, there would be a creaking sound. Ziyue's pace was very fast. He sped through the 7 to 8 li official road and then directly stepped onto a small path on the side. After thinking for a while, Ziyue didn't continue to go deeper through the small path. Instead, he directly went up the small hill beside the small path and hid in a thick bush. From here, he could directly see the passers-by on the official road and the small path. He guessed that the people from the Wu-Wei escort agency would probably take Old Sixth Lu to Wujiang County through the small path or the mountain path. However, it was better to be safe than sorry. Even he could analyze that the people from the Wu-Wei escort agency would pass by Oxhead Mountain. Wouldn't they themselves be on guard? Not to mention, if the water bandit immortal in Shui also made the same judgment and set up an ambush near Oxhead Mountain, wouldn't he be putting himself in danger if he rushed in? He only had one life. This time, he wanted to snatch food from the tiger's mouth. Naturally, he had to be very cautious and carefully consider everything that could happen. Therefore, in the end, he still decided to wait on this official road and the only way to Oxhead Mountain. At most, he would follow them for a while. Next, I just have to wait. I hope my judgment is right. Ziyue squatted in the bush. Some dew fell on his body, making his body and mind cold. However, he ignored it. Fortunately, there were no snakes or insects in this season. He was still very safe in the bush. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, Ziyue didn't dare to let down his guard. He was always paying attention to the movements around him. From time to time, there would be people walking on the official road. Every time this happened, Ziyue would be distracted to observe. He would only relax when he was sure that they weren't from the escort agency. Finally, after half an hour, Ziyue's spirit was lifted. At this time, there was a trace of light in the sky. He saw a group of people walking quickly from afar. There were a total of 5 people in this group. 4 of them were strong. Even in the cold winter, their sleeves were rolled up and they wore thin clothes. It was obvious that they were trained in martial arts and weren't afraid of the cold. At this time, they were all holding weapons in their hands. Ziyue even vaguely saw the word Wu on their sleeves. Therefore, he immediately judged that these 4 people were the escorts sent by the Wu-Wei escort agency this time. At the same time, Ziyue also noticed that among the 4 people, there was a short and skinny man in his 30s. He was carrying a backpack and walking step by step. If Ziyue guessed correctly, he should be Sixth Lu. Chapter 37. Ziyue slowly withdrew his gaze and no longer stared at them deliberately. He knew that people who practice martial arts had developed their 5 senses and were extremely sensitive to other people's gazes. Even for himself, perhaps because of his strong spirit attribute. He could quickly detect when someone stared at him occasionally, whether it was malice or kindness. He wasn't sure if there was such a person among the people of Wu-wei Escort Agency, but he didn't want to take the risk. The five of them gradually approached and soon came to the intersection of the official road and the small road. Baiziwa lowered his body slightly, and his breathing calmed down. Without any pause, the five of them directly walked down the official road and went to the small road. It seems that the deterrent force of the Ghost Head village is still stronger than the water bandits and immortals in the water. Baiziwa thought to himself as he watched them go deeper into the forest and head towards Oxhead Mountain. After confirming that they had gone far, Ziwe was about to move, but suddenly he squatted down again. A short and thin man, who had the same figure as Old Sixth Lu among the five of them, also quickly walked over and stepped into the small road almost without any pause. This person looks like Old Sixth Lu. Could it be? Ziwe's heart skipped a beat. The cicada's carapace stratagem. Ziwe quickly guessed the truth of the matter. The five people before were probably the people of Wu-wei Escort Agency, but one of them pretended to be Old Sixth Wu and walked in front. Once there was an ambush, the real Old Sixth Wu behind could deal with it calmly. If everything went smoothly, he could naturally get through the crisis safely. To make Wu-wei Escort Agency use themselves as bait, Old Sixth Wu obviously paid a great price. However, Ziwe had to admit that this method was extremely clever. If he hadn't waited here in advance and decided to move after a while, it was very likely that he would have been detected. After Old Sixth Lu went deep into the small road, Ziwe waited for a while again. Finally, he jumped out of the bushes when he saw that no one was approaching. Along the small road, Ziwe approached carefully and always kept a distance of more than 100 meters from Old Sixth Wu. He only approached when he was sure that Old Sixth Wu couldn't see him. After walking 3 to 5 miles, a stern shout suddenly came from afar. "Be careful." Immediately after, the sounds of martial artists fighting and killing could be heard. The water immortal indeed set up an ambush in advance. Baiziwa had figured out the situation almost instantly. This shout clearly reminded Old Sixth Lu of something. At this moment, the man turned around without hesitation and quickly ran back the way he came. "He's here." Ziwe immediately pulled out the pig slaughtering knife. This was the only weapon he could find at the moment. Although the blade was a little rusty, it was still sharp enough to kill. A determined look appeared on his face as he prepared to fight to the death. Suddenly, about 10 meters away from him, 3 strong men suddenly appeared and blocked Old Sixth Lu's path. Because Ziwe's position happened to be at the corner of the path, and because he was very careful along the way, those people did not discover his tracks. Ziwe's face changed, and he hurriedly hid in the corner, his heart pounding. Almost just a little bit. If it weren't for the warning from the Wu-wei Escort Agency, and if these 3 people hadn't jumped out in advance, he would have been exposed. He wanted to be the mantis stalking the cicada, but who knew that there was an oriole behind him? Big brothers. Old Sixth Lu was taken aback. He pretended to be terrified. Old Sixth Lu, hand over the level, 5 golden body technique, and we'll let you go. Otherwise, whether you can live or not depends on whether my knife agrees or not. A shout came from the 3 of them. Did you know that I would pass by here? Old Sixth Lu's face changed. He naturally judged that these people were not the water immortal subordinates. But the moment the other party revealed his identity, he immediately became vigilant. He originally thought that no one would notice his trip except for the water immortal who had been keeping an eye on him. He didn't expect that other than the water immortal, someone else knew about him. He immediately suspected that the people of the Wu-wei Escort Agency had leaked his information, but this was obviously not the time to consider this question, because one of them couldn't hold back and directly attacked. The 3 of them knew that on the other side of the mountain, the people of the Wu-wei Escort Agency and the Water Immortals Water Bandits were fighting fiercely. There wasn't much time left for them, so they naturally had to end the battle quickly. A long knife slashed at Old Sixth Lu at an extremely fast speed. As soon as the other party attacked, Old Sixth Lu, who was originally a little nervous, breathed a sigh of relief. Although the three people in front of him were strong and seemed to have a lot of strength, they couldn't be considered real martial artists. At most, they had cultivated a pole-standing technique and cultivated some force. He suddenly lowered his body and quickly moved forward. His hand was like a chicken's claw, and he suddenly pecked at the big man's hand. Eagle claw technique. He, who had mastered the pole-standing technique, burst out with force. In an instant, a deep wound appeared on the big man's arm. Ah! A miserable cry came from the big man's mouth. Under the sharp pain, he immediately couldn't hold the long knife, and it fell. Old Sixth Lu quickly lowered his body and wanted to pick it up. Old Wu, the other two people were shocked. They quickly moved forward and brandished their long knives quickly, forcing Old Sixth Lu to retreat. The two people's knife techniques were also not methodical, but the random slashes and flashes of the knives made Old Sixth Lu somewhat flustered. After all, Old Sixth Lu was born a water bandit. He had practiced martial arts and had rich combat experience. He suddenly gritted his teeth and clenched his hand. In an instant, his hand turned gray and looked extremely tough. Clang! His claw touched the blade of the long knife, causing it to pause for a moment. With that pause, Old Sixth Lu immediately found an opportunity. He clenched his hand and pulled hard. Let go! Under the great force, the big man's hand that was holding the handle of the knife slipped involuntarily. Clang! Old Sixth Lu took advantage of this opportunity and quickly held his knife horizontally to block the other person's attack. Just as he was feeling smug, another flash of the knife came down quickly. It was the big man whose hand was pecked earlier. At this moment, he had picked up his long knife again and was swinging it down viciously. Old Sixth Lu's expression changed abruptly. He blocked again, but because he was holding the knife, his grip was unstable. The long knife finally fell. At this moment, the other person's knife came down again. As the saying goes, 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. At this moment, he was once again in a difficult situation. Fight! Old Sixth Lu's expression changed. The force in his body surged. He rushed forward to meet the knife and raised his hand again quickly. Eagle claw skill. His hand claw directly pierced into the neck of one of the people. With a squeeze, his throat burst. At the same time, the other person's long knife suddenly slashed his back. Slash! The sound of a knife cutting through cowhide was heard. Although Old Sixth Lu's skin was broken, the wound was not deep. Only a little bit of blood flowed out. His skin is as tough as a cowhide. This Old Sixth Lu has indeed started external forging. He should be in the early stage of external forging, the realm of external forging of skin and membrane. Ziyue, who was hiding behind the corner and watching all this, was moved. A trace of passion flashed in his eyes. Chapter 38. A martial artist cultivation consisted of external forging and internal forging. External forging was divided into external forging of skin and membrane, external forging of flesh and blood, and external forging of bones and tendons. External forging of skin and membrane could make a person's skin as tough as an old bull's. Even a blade could not cut through it. Old Sixth Lu should have only begun the initial practice of external forging of skin and membrane. Otherwise, the wound would not have been so deep. However, even if it was only the initial practice, his skin and membrane were already very different. It had become much tougher and could withstand part of the attack. Humph! Old Sixth Lu snorted and turned around. He aimed his claw at the other man's temple and gave it a hard peck. Blood spurted out. The man's eyes rolled back, and he died. After killing 2 people in a row, Old Sixth Lu's aura became even stronger. Just a glare seemed to be more intimidating than before. The last man saw this, and his face turned pale. He panicked and turned to run. The 3 of them had joined forces, but 2 of them had been killed in the blink of an eye. They were naturally terrified. However, Old Sixth Lu would not let them escape. He endured the pain on his back and stomped on the ground. The ground caved in slightly under the force. His body seemed to be loaded with springs. He crossed a few meters in the blink of an eye. He stretched out his hand and placed it directly on the man's shoulder. Then he grabbed and twisted his hand. With a cracking sound, the last person's neck was broken by him. Phew, you dare to kill me? You should know if you have the ability to do so. Old Sixth Lu took a deep breath and said with a sneer, if any one of the three men had reached the level of external forging of skin and membrane, he would have been in deep trouble. However, they were just ordinary people who had practiced pole standing and had a little bit of force. They had not even practiced martial arts. Of course, he did not take them seriously, as expected of a martial artist who has undergone external forging. His strength, stamina, and speed are much stronger than ordinary people. Ziyue's heart tightened. Old Sixth Lu's ability to kill 3 people in a row put a certain amount of pressure on him. Oh no, he found me. Suddenly, Ziyue's expression changed. He saw Old Sixth Lu suddenly crouch and pick up a long saber. He quickly rushed toward him. There's another one. Kid, is he one of their sons? Today, I'll let your whole family gather. As Old Sixth Lu said this, his expression turned vicious. He raised his hand and swung his saber. I'm your father. Ziyue's face was filled with anger, but his figure suddenly retreated. Old Sixth Lu was slightly stunned, and his eyes suddenly became cold. The saber light turned, and the saber fell down fiercely. Clang! The sound of metal clashing could be heard. In the blink of an eye, Ziyue finally lifted his saber. Pig slaughtering knife. Even though he looked a little young and weak, he could not stand up to the wind. However, with his Zen stance perfected, his physique and strength were far superior to the 3 men from before. In terms of strength, he was only slightly weaker than Old Sixth Lu, who had already begun his external tempering. Old Sixth Lu's saber was completely blocked by him, even though he had used all his strength. So strong. Old Sixth Lu's heart skipped a beat. He finally realized that the young man in front of him was not simple. It was impossible for an ordinary person to possess such great strength when they were in their teens. Although his opponent was surprised, Ziyue did not dare to be distracted. This was his first real battle since he started learning martial arts. As soon as his opponent charged at him, he was fully focused. 18 consecutive saber moves. Ziyue guided the force in his body and swung his pig slaughtering knife like lightning. As early as yesterday, after Ziyue had mastered the 18 consecutive saber moves, he immediately raised it to the level of small success. In the small success 18 consecutive saber moves, 3 saber moves could be turned into 1 saber move. Its power was doubled compared to normal. Ziyue's move seemed to be only 1 move, but there were 3 forces in his arm that exploded at the same time. After all, Old Sixth Lu had rich combat experience. Although he was a little surprised, he reacted quickly. He raised his long saber to block by Ziyue's saber, while his other hand tightened and turned black, turning into an eagle's claw. He leaned forward and wanted to take advantage of the momentum to kill the kid in front of him. However, the moment his saber blocked Ziyue's pig slaughtering knife. Clang! After a crisp sound, he immediately felt a force that was far beyond his expectations gushing out from the pig slaughtering knife. It was as if the force was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. It directly knocked his saber to the side. As the force gushed out, his body stagnated for a moment. Kill him while he's down. Ziyue naturally did not want to miss such an opportunity. The force in his body surged quickly, and his other hand seemed to have doubled in size in an instant. He then punched out. Straight connecting punch. The great success level 1-word linked punch landed heavily on Old Sixth Lu's stomach. Bam! Old Sixth Lu's stomach caved in. The powerful force gushed out like a firecracker. Not only did it tear apart his clothes and tough skin, but it also sent his body flying. After 3 or 4 meters, he fell down like a rag. Walking quickly, Ziyue raised his pig slaughtering knife again and swung it down without hesitation. Puff! The pig slaughtering knife landed directly on Old Sixth Lu's neck, and the blade sank into his flesh. I didn't expect that I could only cut his neck in half after using all my strength. From the looks of it, The executioner's blade on the beheading platform back then was definitely not simple. Looking at old Sixth Liu, who was finally killed by him, Liu did not know why, but he suddenly remembered the executioner's strike on the first day he stepped into Qinghe town. At that time, he only thought that the strike was very fast, extremely fast. However, in comparison, he felt that the strike was not only fast, but also extremely powerful. It should be noted that old Sixth Liu's neck, which was only at the initial stage of external forging, was already so difficult to cut. It was said that Wu Yang, the fourth chieftain of the Ghost Head stronghold, was at the level of internal refining. Not only was his skin as tough as an old cow's, but his muscles and bones were also trained to an amazing degree. Even so, his head was separated from his body in an instant when faced with that strike. One could only imagine how terrifying that strike was. During the battle, Liu was nervous and excited, but when he really killed old Sixth Liu, his heart inexplicably calmed down. Facing the bloody scene of blood gushing out of his opponent's neck, he did not feel as uncomfortable as he did at the beginning. Of course, Liu naturally knew that this was not the time to reminisce and lament. After confirming that old Sixth Liu was completely dead, he immediately untied the bag on his body. From the beginning to the end, old Sixth Liu had been carrying a bag on his body. He was not sure if the external forging skill book was in the bag. Perhaps for safety reasons, old Sixth Liu had left the 5-stage golden body book with the people from the Wu escort agency. However, Ziyue had no choice. He could not rush to the Oxhead Mountain and take it back. It was obvious that the people from the Wu escort agency were much stronger than old Sixth Liu. Of course, that included him. Chapter 39. Not to mention, there was also a group of water bandits led by the water immortal over there. However, Ziyue still believed that with old Sixth Liu's cautious behavior, he would never be willing to let his things fall into the hands of others. It seems to be a bit heavy. Ziyue raised his eyebrows in surprise and felt the weight of the package in his hand. Opening it quickly, Ziyue's breathing quickened for a moment. Silver, so much silver. Pieces of fist-sized silver were very heavy. However, what really attracted his attention were 2 other thread-bound books. Eagle Claw Technique, 5 Stages of Golden Body. Ziyue's eyes lit up, and he was a little excited. This external forging technique, 5 Stages of Golden Body, is indeed carried by him. After confirming this, Ziyue completely relaxed. Now that he had achieved his goal, he had no intention of staying any longer. At this time, he clearly felt that the sounds of the battle in the distance had gradually stopped. He knew that it would be too late if he didn't leave now. So he quickly put away the package and left with it. Bai Ziyue's return was much faster than when he had arrived. He sprinted as fast as he could, raising his speed to the maximum. His footsteps crushed the ground, and his strength burst forth like a spring jumping. With just a step, he covered a distance of 2 to 3 meters. He crossed a distance of 100 meters in less than 10 seconds. 10 minutes later, a group of 3 people appeared on the battlefield where Ziyue had been. Almost all of them were injured, especially a burly man. There was a long saber scar from his chest down to his stomach. His flesh and blood were overturned. Although he had applied golden sore ointment, it was still very terrifying. They were the escorts of the Wu escort agency. Of the 5, only 3 of them came back alive in the end. Among them, the one with the lightest injuries was the escort, disguised as old Sixth Liu. As he walked, it was obvious that his status should be above the other 2. I was careless. I didn't expect old Sixth Liu to be unable to escape this disaster in the end. Looking at old Sixth Liu's corpse, the man said in a complicated tone, "He only has himself to blame for this. If he had taken the official road according to our plan, with the tacit understanding between our escort agency and the Ghost Head stronghold, he would have at most lost half of his wealth and would have been able to pass safely. It was better than losing both his money and his life. He even caused our escort to fail, and we lost 2 of our brothers." Someone said indignantly, "The only pity is that the water immortal escaped in the end." Otherwise, I could have avenged the Sioux brothers. Another person quickly added, "Don't say any more. Since you've chosen to be an escort, you should be mentally prepared. In this world, were there no deaths?" First of all, we need to determine how Old Sixth Lu died so that we can report back to the escort leader. Otherwise, the Sioux brothers would have died in vain if the Jingxi Business Alliance could not get the 100 taels of silver that Old Sixth Lu gave them. Besides, Old Sixth Lu hasn't been dead for long. Maybe we can catch up to him. As he spoke, the man squatted down and began to carefully examine Old Sixth Lu's cause of death. The explosive force of the punch directly tore apart his skin membrane. Judging from the power of this punch, the other party has at least reached the middle stage of external forging, the level of external forging of the flesh and blood. However, the real cause of Old Sixth Lu's death is the saber on his neck. It's just that there was a hint of confusion on his face. Judging from the strength of the other party's punch, the other party had at least reached the level of external forging of the flesh and blood to be able to cause such a big injury. However, the power of this saber seemed to be a little weaker than the power of a true middle-stage external forging martial artist. "Chief Wang, look here. There's a series of footprints." Suddenly, a burly man shouted at him. He immediately walked forward and looked at the footprints on the ground. He stretched out his palm to compare them, and the confusion on his face became even stronger. He said, "This is the result of gathering strength at the tip of the foot and using the explosive force of the tip of the foot to travel." However, judging from the size of the toe on the footprints and the distance of each step, the other party's legs must not be too long. Could it be that the other party is a woman? Or is it just a child? He thought in his heart and first ruled out the possibility that it was a child. Judging from the size of the footprints, if it was a child, the other party was at most 12 or 13 years old. At this age, even if they had practiced martial arts from a young age, it was not certain that they could achieve full mastery of pole standing, let alone directly possessing the strength of external forging of the flesh and blood. Old Sixth Lu's strength was not strong, but it was not weak either. He was definitely not someone that an ordinary child could deal with. If it was a martial arts genius, he probably would not have taken a fancy to the things on Old Sixth Lu's body. If it's a female martial artist, then everything from before makes sense. Even if martial artists did not distinguish between men and women, in terms of strength, women were obviously inferior to men. Everything was clear when compared to his previous observation. "I'll go after first. You guys follow behind." He made up his mind and could not help but be greedy for the fine silver on Old Sixth Lu's body. He shouted in a low voice and quickly chased after it. If Old Sixth Lu was still alive, he might have suppressed his greed due to the deterrence of the escort agency. Now that Old Sixth Lu was dead, the silver on his body was now ownerless. Naturally, it was up to the capable to obtain it. He knew that Old Sixth Lu had betrayed the water bandits this time and obtained not only the 5th stage of the external forging technique, but also the wealth that the water immortal had accumulated for many years. Otherwise, the water immortal would not have made such a big fuss and almost turned out in full force to kill him. He believed that his strength was not bad. Perhaps he could really catch up with that woman and obtain this windfall. The other two looked at each other and had to endure the pain of their wounds and follow. Near the city gate, Ziwei calmly looked at himself. After confirming that he did not miss anything, he slowly walked to the back of the line to enter the city and waited patiently. He was dressed in coarse hemp clothes and had a wooden face. Other than his eyes, he looked no different from an ordinary country bumpkin. The only difference was that the cloth bag on his back was a little too big and did not match his size. The soldier guarding the gate could not help but take a second look. Ziwei quickly said, "I'm an inner disciple of the Scorching Sun gang. I came back from my hometown this time." As he spoke, after paying the entrance fee of 1 copper coin, he quickly handed over the inner disciple token that represented his identity. "Go in." Hearing this, the soldier let him go lightly. With the strength of the Scorching Sun gang in Qinghe town, even the Lord Garrison attached great importance to them. Naturally, He did not dare to deliberately make things difficult for them. It was not until this moment that Ziyue really let out a long sigh of relief. This time, although the process was thrilling, it was smooth all the way. And Ziyue could not help but reach out and pinch the corner of the cloth bag. When he touched the hard silver, his heart immediately calmed down. Although he did not count it carefully, he knew that there was definitely a lot of silver in this cloth bag. He even saw a few golden leaves. Please collect it. Recommendation ticket. Chapter 40. At this time, the sky was already bright. Ziyue walked on the street, not daring to look around too much. Soon, he arrived near North Street. Entering from a small alley in the North Street area, Ziyue familiarly came to the back door of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch. Suddenly, Ziyue frowned slightly. From his angle, he happened to see two people standing in the corner of the alley, quietly sizing up the back door of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch. The moment Ziyue's eyes met theirs, he could clearly sense their evasiveness and panic. But soon, when the two saw him, their eyes were filled with disbelief. That position, they're watching? Who are they watching? Apart from some vegetable farmers who transport ingredients and wood in and out of the back door every day, only apprentices would walk this way. Wait, when I first saw them, their expressions were filled with panic. That's right, people with a guilty conscience are all like that. But after that, the look of surprise and disbelief on their faces is worth thinking about. Ziyue was puzzled, but his expression suddenly changed. They're watching me. His heart immediately tightened, because he had left early in the morning, before the sun had even risen, and they must have been watching outside since early in the morning. Now that they found him coming back from outside, it was natural for them to be in disbelief. Are they haunting me? Ziyue's expression was ugly. He quickly guessed who sent them. Looking at the two people again, he saw that they were still in the same place, with no intention of leaving. His expression hardened, and he walked over without hesitation. Passively waiting for others to make a move was never his style. What he wanted to do was to seize the initiative. If the evil ghost cultivator had shown up, he might have been a little panicked. After all, the other party was able to control ghosts, so his methods must be extraordinary, especially his incomparably mysterious magic, which made him extremely wary. But they were just two ordinary people who had never cultivated. With his physique twice that of an adult, he was not afraid at all. Compared to old Sixth Liu, who he had just killed, these two people were as weak as chickens. Seeing that Ziyue actually dared to walk directly towards them, the two young men were shocked, but at the same time, they were ecstatic. In their eyes, even if Ziyue was an apprentice of the Scorching Sun Gang, he was still young. How could he be a match for two adults? Originally, they were still a little worried. If Ziyue had been in the Scorching Sun Gang's branch all this time, and they were only monitoring him, how could they make any contributions? Now, as long as they could capture Ziyue and hand him over to the Immortal Master, they would naturally be rewarded and might even be able to learn immortal techniques. Thinking of this, the two of them grinned and said, "There's a path to heaven, but you don't want to take it. There's no door to hell, but you barge in." Then, he quickly rushed forward, wanting to capture Ziyue. Sure enough, they are just two punks. They really don't know anything about the power of a martial artist. Ziyue sighed. His hands shot out like lightning and grabbed the two men's arms. He squeezed and twisted. With two cracking sounds, the two men's arms were immediately crushed by him. Then, Ziyue quickly kicked out twice and directly sent the two men flying into the other side of the alley. "Ah, it hurts. My hand is broken." Two wailing voices were only heard at this time. Too noisy. Ziyue's eyes flashed fiercely. He quickly came in front of one of them and kicked him hard again. A few teeth mixed with blood directly spurted out. Then, he quickly came in front of another man and directly stepped on his head. He didn't even use his full strength, but the two men were easily subdued by him. Moreover, although his body was a little thin, his strength was very amazing. The punks were stepped on by his leg and couldn't break free at all. What do you want?" he asked in a panic. "Let me ask you, who sent you to monitor us?" Ziyue asked coldly. No, no one. Ah, the hooligan rolled his eyes, trying to fool Bai Ziyue. However, Bai Ziyue would not give him the chance. His other foot directly crushed the crook of the hooligan's arm. With a burst of force, the hooligan's other hand was broken with a crack. You don't have to tell me. I like to see how many arms and legs you can break. Ziyue's tone was cold, and his eyes were full of coldness. I'll tell you, I'll tell you. The young man's face was covered with cold sweat. He didn't dare to hide anything and quickly said, We don't know who he is. We only know that he's an immortal master who has mastered the immortal art. He asked us to monitor you here. Once he found you going out from the back door, he asked us to inform him immediately. Is that so? Ziyue looked at the other man. The man quickly nodded and said, That's right. I remember the immortal master said that you took something from him. Took something from him? Ziyue was startled and suddenly remembered the round jade he got from the female ghost. Although he kept the jade back then, he didn't pay too much attention to it after studying it for a while and didn't find anything. He wanted to find time to find an auction house to sell it for some money. Now, it seemed that there was a mystery behind it. What does he look like? What are his characteristics? How's his strength? Bai Ziyue hurriedly asked. Now that the other party had investigated him thoroughly, he naturally wanted to find out more about the other party. If the other party suddenly attacked, he wouldn't know who it was. If he really met the other party, he would be on guard. Immortal Master. He's about 7 feet tall and looks very young. However, his face is sallow and he often wears a black and purple Taoist robe. All right, there's a big black mole on his face near his ear. A yellow gourd can often be seen hanging on his waist. There seems to be a strange smell on his body. I can't tell what it is, but it smells a little like the stench of rotting corpses. The other man added. Nodding his head, Ziyue had a rough understanding of the evil cultivator's appearance. Exorcism, a big black mole on his face, and a yellow gourd hanging on his waist. Could it be a legendary treasure? Well, we've said what we need to say. Can you let us go now? Seeing Ziyue pondering silently, one of the hooligans boldly asked, Let you go? Ziyue's eyes revealed a trace of coldness, but he said calmly, Of course I can. However, since he's so unscrupulous, I have to retaliate and give him some gifts. Politeness demands reciprocity, right? Then, a series of blood-curdling screams came from the two men's mouths. A minute later, Ziyue walked out of the secluded alley. Naturally, he didn't kill the two men. Even in a place like Qinghe Town, once someone's life was involved, a small matter would become a big matter. He didn't want to get into such trouble. However, there was no reason for him to let the two men who dared to spy on him go so easily. Unless the evil cultivator helped them, the two of them would probably have to live with crutches for the rest of their lives. Chapter 41. After a few minutes, Ziyue smoothly returned to his room. After confirming that no one was paying attention to him, he carefully closed the door and placed a cloth bag he obtained from old Sixth Lu on the table. After staring at the cloth bag for a while, his originally tense emotions gradually relaxed. Then, he quickly became excited. Without hesitation, he hurriedly opened the cloth bag. The moment the cloth bag was opened, even though he was already mentally prepared, his pupils still shrank and his face revealed an excited expression. The first thing that caught his eye were the scattered pieces of silver. Each piece was the size of a child's fist and was worth 10 taels each. The degree of curvature and the engraving on the silver belonged to the Jingxi Chamber of Commerce. Anyone who saw this would instantly become short of breath. 13 pieces. Ziyue swallowed his saliva and took out all the silver pieces. He arranged them on the table, and there were exactly 13 pieces. Then, Ziyue naturally could not wait to take out 2 books from the bag. 5 sections of Golden Body, Eagle Claw. Looking at the names of the books, Ziyue once again revealed an expression of ecstasy. Even though I took a huge risk this time, just obtaining 5 sections of Golden Body is worth it. Not to mention, there is even an additional book, Eagle Claw. Ziyue had seen old Sixth Lu use the Eagle Claw technique before. It was fierce, and when the claw reached out, it could even crush a stone. It was definitely a powerful martial art. After taking out the silver and the book, there were only two things left in the cloth bag. One was a long wooden box, and the other was a small porcelain bottle. Ziyue picked up the wooden box. When he was in the battlefield, he had actually hurriedly opened it. At this time, when he opened the wooden box again, 10 pieces of golden leaves and 4 or 5 crystal-clear jade pendants immediately appeared in front of him. It is indeed a huge fortune. Just the 13 pieces of silver alone are worth a total of 130 taels. And here, there are 11 pieces of golden leaves. According to the calculation of 1 tael of gold equal to 10 taels of silver, 1 piece of golden leaf is about 1 tael and a half, which is 165 taels of silver. In addition, there are 5 valuable jade pendants. Ziyue did a little calculation, took a deep breath, and said, "The total is worth at least 500 taels of silver." 500 taels of silver was definitely an unimaginable fortune for Ziyue. A few months ago, Ziyue only had 3 taels of silver on him, and it was his mother's hard work for 2 months. An ordinary water bandit definitely can't have so much money. Obviously, this was stolen from the water immortal when he betrayed us. Ziyue quickly came up with a guess. If it weren't for the huge loss, the water immortal wouldn't have spent so much effort to track down 6th Lu and set up an ambush to kill him. Finally, Ziyue picked up the porcelain bottle soon. He saw a golden sticker on the outside of the porcelain bottle. A few words were clearly written on it. Qi and blood pill. Ziyue was shocked. Medicinal pills. He knew that in the scorching Sun Gang branch, inner sect apprentices had the opportunity to receive a Qi and blood pill every month. It was said that it could strengthen one's Qi and blood and enhance one's potential. But it was obvious that Qi and blood pills were far inferior to Qi and blood pills. But now, a bottle of Qi and blood pills appeared in his hand. This was obviously for 6th Lu's cultivation. Even though he didn't know the value of this Qi and blood pill, he knew that in the scorching Sun Gang branch, there were inner sect apprentices who were willing to spend 1 tael of silver to exchange for Qi and blood pills with others for cultivation. Judging from this, the value of this Qi and blood pill was naturally far more than 1 tael of silver. Opening the porcelain bottle, Ziyue poured it out. 2 thumb-sized Qi and blood pills, pink in color, lay quietly in his hand. Obviously, there should have been 3 pills in this porcelain bottle, but 6th Lu used one of them, leaving only 2. Ziyue carefully placed the 2 Qi and blood pills back into the porcelain bottle. Then, he wrapped up all his gains and carefully hid them. He needed to carefully consider how to use these gains to increase his strength. I definitely have to practice the 5th stage golden body. My strength has already reached a bottleneck. If I only practice martial techniques, although my strength will increase, it won't increase by much. Only by practicing the 5th stage golden body and stepping into the outer forging realm will my strength, stamina, speed, and most importantly, my strength increase. This way, I'll have more confidence to face that evil ghost cultivator whose background I don't know. Ziyue thought silently. Without resolving this problem, he didn't even dare to head to the heavy Inkstone Mountain to practice the Purple Qi Divine observation technique. As for the scorching Sun Gang branch, due to the low terrain, even if he stayed on the roof, it would be difficult for him to seize the opportunity to absorb the rising sun's purple qi in time for cultivation. Naturally, his path of cultivation had reached a standstill. Also, now that I have enough money, perhaps I can practice drawing talismans according to the methods in the 100 Talisman catalog. Previously, Ziyue had always yearned for the various mystical talismans in the 100 Talisman catalog. He wanted to practice drawing talismans. However, because of his shyness, just the talisman brush required to draw talismans made him shrink back at the sight of it, and so he gave up. The talisman brush required to draw talismans was completely different from ordinary brushes. The most ordinary one was the weasel hair brush. One would cost at least 3 or 4 taels of silver. The higher grade ones even required the hair of strange beasts with exuberant qi and blood. They had the effect of communicating with spirits, so the price was naturally high. As for the talisman ink, although cinnabar could also be used if one truly wanted to display the power described in the 100 Talisman catalog, one would generally need to use a higher grade of talisman ink. As for the talisman paper, the 100 stacks of paper used by the government for the imperial examinations were enough. They were not rare outside, but the only thing was that they were expensive. With his thoughts set, Ziyue also became much more relaxed. Just as he was about to get up and leave, a series of footsteps sounded from outside. Immediately after, a series of knocks sounded from the door. "Is Junior Marshal Brother Mount Ziyue here?" A somewhat young voice sounded from outside the door. "Is it Senior Marshal Brother Qin? I'll open the door right away." Ziyue was slightly taken aback. He hurriedly got up and opened the door, asking doubtfully, "Is there something Senior Marshal Brother Qin wants?" The person who had come was indeed Qin Xiaoping. "Junior Marshal Brother Mount Ziyue, I've come to congratulate you. I originally received the news yesterday and rushed to the martial arts field early in the morning to tell you. Who knew that you actually didn't come today?" As he spoke, Qin Xiaoping said with a helpless expression. He had intentionally woken up an hour earlier than usual this morning, just so that he could tell Qin Xiaoping this good news as soon as possible. Congratulate? What good news? Ziyue was still somewhat puzzled. His plan this morning had yielded great results and could be considered a joyous event. However, it was obvious that the good news that Qin Xiaoping spoke of had nothing to do with his matter. Chapter 42. Didn't I say that with your talent, someone would want to take you as a disciple very soon? For the next few days, there was no news from the 5 supervisors, so I thought there was an accident. It wasn't until last night when I met my master that I learned from him that it wasn't that they didn't want to take you as a disciple, but that someone even more powerful had taken a fancy to you and wanted to take you as a disciple. Qin Xiaoping said with a smile. Someone even more powerful? Who is it? Ziyue's heart skipped a beat, and he was a little excited. He had long known that Qin Xiaoping's master was the supervisor of the law enforcement hall, Tan Xiaofan, who was at the peak of internal refining. It was said that his strength could be ranked in the top 5 in the entire Scorching Sun gang branch. He had once fought against a martial artist who had cultivated internal qi and retreated unscathed. In the entire Scorching Sun gang branch, there were very few people whom he could admit that he was inferior to. At most, there were only 3. They were the leader of the Scorching Sun gang branch, Lu Dong, the left guardian, Zhao Jing, the right guardian, Lu Yang. All 3 of them had cultivated their internal qi and were extremely powerful. They were the top fighting force of the Scorching Sun gang in Qingatown. Could it be? Yue guessed and looked forward to it. Leader Lu Dong, Qin Xiaoping said hurriedly. Ziyue was delighted and asked, "Really? Of course it's true. Originally, Guardian Lu Yang also wanted to take you as a disciple, but it was said that the leader spoke, so he retreated. I think it won't be long before the leader sends someone to invite you to be his disciple," Qin Xiaoping said with a trace of envy in his eyes. "It's too early to say that." Ziyue waved his hand. He was indeed a little excited at first, but he soon calmed down. Anything could change as long as it wasn't really confirmed. The more he encountered, the less easily he would be affected. Sometimes, even though the apprentices were relatively isolated from each other, the speed at which information spread was extremely fast. When Ziyue appeared in the cafeteria, almost everyone looked at him strangely. The respect and awe on his face, as well as the envy and jealousy on his face, were clearly revealed. Especially the 2 inner court apprentices who had looked down on him during their discussion the day before. Even if he was by their side, they didn't have any scruples. But now, they immediately went up to him and pretended to greet him affectionately and flattered him. Even if Ziyue showed a cold attitude, they didn't mind at all and were still as enthusiastic as before. In the training grounds, most of the time, they would cultivate by themselves. However, whenever Zhang Xin appeared, there would always be apprentices who would intentionally approach him to seek his guidance. However, if it was a sincere request, he wouldn't mind giving some pointers. With his mastery of the Dhyana stance, it was not difficult for him to give pointers to some apprentices who had just entered the Diana stance. Moreover, he was not much worse than the instructors. However, he soon realized that these people had ulterior motives. They were all opportunistic people who wanted to make friends with him. There weren't many who were truly focused on the Diana stance. He had no choice but to leave quickly. If he continued to stay, he wouldn't have any time to practice. Name: ZUS Strength 1. 99. Cannot be improved. Speed 1. 85. Cannot be improved. Physique 2. 03. Cannot be improved. Spirit 1. 80. Cannot be improved. Martial Arts. Diana stance perfection. Cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes can be improved. Great mastery of straight punch. Cannot be improved. Immortal technique. Purple Chi divine technique. Cannot be improved. Spiritual energy. 672-inch spiritual energy is more than 670 points. It is enough to improve the 18 consecutive strikes to the great mastery level. However, if I continue to improve the 18 consecutive strikes with a great mastery of straight punch, my strength won't increase by much. I might as well keep it for now and use it at a crucial moment. On the way back, Ziyue looked at his attribute panel and thought silently. Originally, he only had a few dozen points of spiritual energy left. However, the 3 people who killed Old Sixth Lu gave him more than 100 points of spiritual energy each. In addition to Old Sixth Lu's 300 points, his spiritual energy had finally reached more than 600 points. However, this amount of spiritual energy was still too little for him, especially when he didn't have any spiritual energy in a short period of time. Therefore, even if he wanted to feel the power of the 18 consecutive strikes, he didn't want to directly use spiritual energy to improve it. Junior Bai, what a coincidence. Suddenly, a voice sounded. Ziyue was stunned and looked over. A man with a ferocious face and a long scar on his face stood not far away. He was smiling like a chrysanthemum flower. Mr. Qian? Ziyue was surprised. The person who greeted him was the manager of the sundry goods department, Qian Ming, who had assigned him a job. However, compared to the greedy and cold attitude he had before, he was now full of enthusiasm and even seemed to be trying to please him. Junior Bai, you could just call me Senior Qian Ming. Seeing that Bai Ziyue still recognized him, Qian Ming seemed to be extremely excited. He quickly approached him and said, I've long seen that Junior Brother Bai's talent is out of the ordinary. You're smart and quick-witted. You'll definitely be a giant among men in the future. Now that I see it, it's true. In just 2 short months, you've been promoted from a chores apprentice to an inner apprentice. Now, you're even valued by the sect leader and will be accepted as a disciple. You're really a legend, a role model for my generation. Stop. What do you mean? Ziyue quickly stopped. Although the other party's flattery made him feel a little smug, he didn't have the time to listen to his nonsense. I just admire a person like Junior Brother Bai, so I came over to say hello, Qian Ming said with a smile. All right, we've already said hello. If there's nothing else, I'll go back first. Ziyue looked at him indifferently and walked away. Hey, don't. Seeing this, Qian Ming was shocked and quickly stopped him. He said, Actually, I came this time to apologize to you. Back then, I failed to recognize Mount Tai and caused Bai Shidi to suffer in the Pearl restaurant for 2 months. The things inside are, firstly, my apology, and secondly, my congratulations to Junior Bai for becoming the sect leader's disciple. As he spoke, Qian Ming revealed a pained expression and handed over a red gift box from behind him. Senior Qian, you're too polite, Ziyue said, and took it without batting an eyelid. He also gained a new understanding of Qian Ming. This was a greedy and smart person. Even if Ziyue wasn't a threat to him at the moment, he was able to make a decision quickly and put down his status to make friends with him. He could definitely be considered a smart person. Although Ziyue didn't have a good impression of him, he didn't hold a grudge against him. At most, he felt some disgust. Now that the other party sincerely apologized and even gave him a gift, he really couldn't pursue the matter of the other party extorting him when he assigned him chores. After all, he didn't lose anything. Instead, he profited from the disaster and obtained the immortal cultivation technique, purple chi divine observation technique, and 100 talisman catalog. Chapter 43. Of course. It's my honor to be acquainted with by Shitty. Qianming said hurriedly. Is that so? Ziyue declined to comment. Looking at Qianming's departing figure, Ziyue pondered for a moment before leaving as well. Vitality pill. When Bai Ziyue opened the so-called apology gift from Qianming, he revealed a surprised expression. Inside a wooden box, 12 vitality pills were arranged neatly on top of it. Based on their appearance, there was not much difference between vitality pills and vitality pills. They were both pink in color and the size of a thumb. However, compared to vitality pills were rounder and glossier. Vitality pills, on the other hand, were much cruder. Even though he had not consumed them before, he knew that there was a huge difference in their effects. Qianming has spent quite a bit of money on a vitality pill that's worth 1 tael of silver. 12 taels of silver was not a small amount for an ordinary inner disciple. However, Ziyue knew that Qianming had spent money to buy safety. Qianming did not have much respect for him. After all, if he really became the disciple of the gate leader, Qianming would feel uncomfortable just by casually saying something. Ziyue was naturally unwilling to do such a thing. However, he would not reject the benefits that Qianming had delivered to him. I've always heard about the effects of vitality pills. They can strengthen one's vitality and increase one's cultivation speed. I was planning to try them at the end of the month when the inner disciple's disciple certificate was distributed. Now is the right time. Ziyue thought to himself. Without any hesitation, he picked up a vitality pill and swallowed it. As soon as the vitality pill entered his stomach, he immediately felt a wave of heat emerge from within and spread to every corner of his body. The physical strength that he had exhausted from cultivating in the training field was immediately replenished. It was as if there was an endless amount of energy surging throughout his body. Without any hesitation, he immediately started cultivating. What he was cultivating was naturally the Dhyana stance. Be it vitality pills or vitality pills, they were pills that strengthened a martial artist's physique and strength. Recovery of energy was only secondary. The perfect level of Dhyana stance and the straight-through fist's unique integration method allowed him to control the chi and blood in his body to reach an astonishing level. Under his control, the surging chi and blood immediately became orderly. Following the surging force of the Dhyana stance, it quickly flowed through his body. The warm feeling made his body and mind feel comfortable. After a while, Ziyue felt that the heat had been completely exhausted. Only then did he stop cultivating. Name: Ziyue Strength 201, not upgradable. Speed 186, cannot be increased. Physique 204, cannot be upgraded. Spirit 180, not upgradable. Martial arts, perfect meditation stance, cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes, small success, upgradable. Mastery of straight punch, unable to be improved. Immortal technique, purple chi visualization technique, cannot be upgraded if not initiated. Soul energy, 672 my strength has increased by 0.02, officially breaking through the 2-point barrier. It's now on the same level as my constitution. As for his speed and vitality, they only increased by 0.01. As expected, my body still has potential to be unearthed. It's just that the Dhyana stance has been upgraded to the perfect level. Even with the help of the chi and blood pill, the effect is not that great. Ziyue compared it to the chi and blood pill in his heart. The chi and blood pill was definitely a good thing for normal inner disciples. It could directly increase their vitality and strength. However, the effect on him was much weaker. If not for the fact that his control of chi and blood had already reached an astonishing level, perhaps the effect of the increase would be even weaker. However, no matter how weak it is, it's still better than nothing. Ziyue had already expected the effect of the Qi and Blood Pill. It could restore his Qi and increase his strength. This was already a pleasant surprise for him. Naturally, he would not be disappointed. As for the remaining 11 Qi and Blood Pills, he planned to use them when he officially cultivated the Stage 5 Golden Body. This was because he heard that external forging and internal refining consumed a lot of Qi and blood. If he only relied on his own cultivation, the amount of Qi and blood produced from normal daily meals was far from enough. The poor studied while the rich practiced martial arts. It was only at this stage that the truth was revealed. Ziyue, the gate master invites you in. In the afternoon, a young man in his 20s wearing a gray shirt found Ziyue and said, the gray robes were actually the uniform of the Odd Jobs disciples in the Radiant Sun Gang. The outer sect disciples wore green robes, while the inner sect disciples wore black robes. Senior brother, please lead the way. Ziyue thought to himself that he was finally here and quickly said, although this young man was only a miscellaneous disciple, he should be working close to the gate master. Naturally, he would be taken seriously. Naturally, Ziyue would not underestimate him. You're welcome. The young man did not seem to be a talkative person. After saying that, he led the way in front. Bai Ziyue hurriedly followed after him. His heart, which was originally a little anxious, finally relaxed. Even if the others were spreading the news that the gate master wanted to take him in as a disciple. However, as long as the news was not confirmed, there would be a trace of worry in his heart. Now that the gate master really sent someone here, he felt more at ease. This is the way to the front yard. Bai Ziyue chuckled as he thought to himself. Someone like the gate master naturally lived in the front yard. Only the apprentices, who had relatively low status, were not qualified to set foot in the front yard. This was the first time he looked at the scene in the front yard. He originally thought that the environment at old Mr. Ho's place was quiet and luxurious. However, at this time, looking at the attic, small pavilion, garden, rockery, and flowing water in the front yard, he realized that old Mr. Ho's residence was still a little shabby in comparison. Not only was this place big, but it was also extremely exquisite. The fake mountain was cleverly integrated with the flowing water. Golden carps swam in the clear lake water, sometimes drilling into the fake mountain, and after swimming for a while, they swam out from another exit. Sometimes they jumped lightly and immediately jumped into another pool. Fat carps rolled in the waves. The trees were cleverly integrated with the surrounding environment. It was quiet and natural. Even the attic and small pavilion, not far away, was full of age characteristics. Not only was it exquisite, but it also had a sense of age. Following the young man, Ziyue quickly stepped into a living room. Immediately, he saw a tall and thin middle-aged man. His forehead was very wide, and his eyebrows were thick. Perhaps because he was too tall and thin, his eyes and cheeks were a little sunken, and he looked a little ordinary. However, his eyes were extremely bright and even a little sharp. Just by looking at him, Ziyue faintly felt a stabbing pain, as if he was burned by the other party's gaze. Ziyue immediately confirmed that this middle-aged man was the gate master of the Scorching Sun Gang branch in Qinghe Town, Sky Hand Ludong. As expected, his judgment was quickly confirmed. Gate master, Ziyue is here, the young man said respectfully. Chapter 44. You may leave. The sect master's indifferent voice sounded. Yes. The young man responded respectfully and quickly retreated. Inner sect apprentice Ziyue greets the sect master. Ziyue bowed slightly and said, I had planned to summon you on the first day I learned of your talent. Do you know why I waited 3 days? Lu Dong asked with a smile. I don't know. Ziyue shook his head. To be able to cultivate the Diana stance to initial success in 40 days. This talent is unique in the entire Qinghe town. Even in Wujiang County, where there are many geniuses, you are one of the best. Most importantly, you are only a miscellaneous apprentice. Not only are your cultivation resources limited, but you also do not have enough time to cultivate. This kind of talent is extremely important to me. Therefore, Even when Right Guardian Lu Yong came forward and said that he wanted to take you as a disciple, I stopped him. However, talent alone is not enough for a martial artist. Apart from talent, you also need to have a firm determination to practice martial arts. The disciple of Lu Dong cannot be someone who only has talent but has a weak heart. These 3 days, I deliberately ignored you. It was actually a test. Fortunately, you did not disappoint me. Even if no one wanted to take you as a disciple, you did not give up on cultivation. You practiced hard every day. Lu Dong was very satisfied with Ziyue. There were many martial artists who were talented and hardworking. However, there were very few who were as talented as Ziyue and could not be swayed by external rumors and persevere in cultivation. Ziyue was silent. He knew his own situation. If he was really an ordinary child, he would definitely not be able to accept the treatment from before. Even if he did not give up, he would be dispirited for a period of time. However, he was not an ordinary person. He was mature and naturally would not be easily affected by other people's comments. Are you willing to take me as your master? Lu Dong asked immediately. Disciple Ziyue greets master. Bai Ziyue was naturally a quick-witted person. He quickly revealed an excited expression and spoke. All right. Lu Dong nodded with satisfaction and said, Our Scorching Sun gang doesn't have too many rules when it comes to accepting disciples. It just so happens that in 7 days, it will be the 70th birthday of Yang Zhengling's father, the guardian of Qinghe Town. At that time, all the important figures of Qinghe Town will be present. I will take you to meet them, which can be considered as acknowledging your identity to the outside world. By the way, you're my 3rd disciple. The other 2 are working in Wujiang County. You will get to know them when you have the chance. He was not surprised that Ziyue had agreed, and he was in a good mood. In fact, Ziyue's talent was the best among his 3 disciples. He was even comparable to some of the influential figures in Wujiang County. Although he had a high position in Qinghe Town, his position in the Scorching Sun gang was actually not high. When he came to Qinghe Town, he might have been banished. He had originally planned to slowly accumulate strength to return to Wujiang County and accept Ziyue as his disciple. He had also planned to use his talent to help him return to the headquarters of the Scorching Sun gang. Thank you, Master. Ziyue said respectfully. You have only achieved initial success in the meditation stance, so you can't practice many martial techniques. The few martial techniques taught in the gang will be enough. In the following period of time, you'll have to put more effort into the meditation stance and strive to achieve great success in it as soon as possible. How about this? I will inform your instructor and ask him to impart strength to you once every 7 days. Hong Gang has already practiced the meditation stance to perfection. After the transfer of strength, you can carefully experience it. It should greatly increase the time it takes for you to achieve great success. Lu Dong thought for a while and said, Master, can I still not learn external forging techniques? Bai Ziyue held it in and asked anyway. If the strength is not enough, how can you train external? When you have achieved great success in the meditation stance, then you can think about external forging. Don't bite off more than you can chew now. Lu Dong reprimanded and said, Yes. Zhu silently lowered his head. It seemed that it was impossible to obtain the external forging technique of the Scorching Sun gang in advance. He could only completely focus on the 5th stage golden body that he had obtained from old 6th Lu. As for the matter of asking his instructor Hong Gang to transfer strength to him, although he would suffer a little, he could not refuse, because this could indeed greatly increase the time it took for a martial artist to achieve great success in the meditation stance. As far as he knew, Senior Qin Xiaoping was also using this method to speed up the cultivation of the meditation stance. Of course, his interval was 10 days. If there is nothing else, you can go back first. 7 days later, I will send someone to bring you to old Master Yang's birthday banquet. Lu Dong waved his hand and said, Master, there is one thing that I cannot say. Ziyue gritted his teeth and said, What is it? Lu Dong revealed a look of surprise. When I first joined the Scorching Sun gang, I originally had the opportunity to become an outer disciple like the others. However, because of someone obstructing me, I lost the opportunity to be promoted and was directly sent to be a chores disciple. Because of this, even if I have mastered the meditation stance early, I have lost the opportunity to become an inner disciple. Therefore, I would like to ask Master to help me punish the person who obstructed me, Ziyue said with a firm gaze. When he first joined the Scorching Sun Gang, he naturally felt that the logistics manager Zhang Bo and the inner disciple Wang Jian deliberately made things difficult for him. Even if he was implicated by Uncle Ming, he was the one who suffered because of it. Originally, he did not have the ability and could only endure for the time being. Now that he had become the sect leader's disciple, he did not want to endure anymore and wanted to take revenge. Oh, Lu Dong was slightly startled, and he could not help but frown. He only knew that Bai Ziyue was a miscellaneous duty apprentice, but he did not think carefully about why Bai Ziyue was still a miscellaneous duty apprentice despite having such talent. After a while, he said with a cold gaze, Lu Dong's disciple, naturally cannot be wronged like this. It is good that you know how to take revenge. You are not a stubborn and ignorant person. Don't worry, I will get justice for you. Thank you, Master. Bai Ziyue bowed slightly with sincerity before retreating. In terms of strength, this apprenticeship did not seem to have many gains. However, Ziyue knew that he had gained a lot this time. First of all, his status had risen. Although they were all inner disciples, the status of an ordinary inner disciple was lower than that of an inner disciple who was apprenticed to one of the 5 great supervisors. When an apprentice who was apprenticed to one of the 5 great supervisors saw Zhao Gongyi, who was apprenticed to the left guardian, Zhao Jing, he also had to greet him. Now that he was apprenticed to the sect leader, even the 5 great supervisors would not look down on him. Not to mention, he did not even have to do anything when he was apprenticed to the sect leader. The logistics manager Zhang Bo and the ordinary inner disciple Wang Jian, who he originally had to look up to, were punished. This could be considered to have resolved the hatred in his heart. Now, one of them was sent to the Wolfhorn Mine as a resident disciple, while the other was sent to the Clear River Wharf as a record keeper. Although it was not considered a serious injury, it was still considered an exile. Not only was their status greatly reduced, but their income was also greatly reduced. Chapter 45. This jade pendant looks exquisite, but it's not as good as the pieces of jade I got from Six Flu. I wonder what's the secret behind it that made the evil ghost cultivator so obsessed with it. In the room, Ziyue took out the round jade from a hidden corner and looked at it carefully again. Ziyue had tried several times before, but he couldn't figure out what secret was hidden in the round jade. This time, he didn't find anything either. I might as well. Ziyue looked hesitant. Then he clenched his teeth, pinched it with both hands, and broke it with force. The jade pendant didn't move at all, nor did it break. There's indeed something special about it. Bai Ziyue confirmed this point once again. Ordinary jade pendants, no matter how exquisite they were actually quite fragile. With his physique that was twice that of ordinary people, it was easy for him to break it. However, this jade pendant was so hard that he couldn't move it even when he used all his strength. Then he tried again. The force in his body surged. Bang! A strong force hit the round jade directly. The force transmitted through the air. In an instant, a faint halo appeared on the round jade. It was as if there was a rebounding force coming from it. Ziyue's hand went numb, and he couldn't hold the round jade anymore, causing it to fall to the ground. After a long while, the faint layer of light finally disappeared. Last time, the female ghost used this round jade to block my full force attack. Could it be that this round jade is a legendary defensive magic weapon? Ziyue couldn't help but come to this conclusion, but soon he shook his head. At that time, he could clearly sense that the female ghost was a little hesitant when she used this round jade. Obviously, defense wasn't the real function of this round jade. It seems that if I want to really understand the secret of this round jade, and even use it for my own use, I have to at least master the purple chi visualization technique. Ziyue sighed helplessly, and finally decided to keep the round jade. Without mastering the purple chi visualization technique and truly cultivating spirit chi, he didn't even know what the round jade was for, let alone use it for his own use. What comes next is the most important. Ziyue took out a book. The words 5 sections of the golden body were clearly visible on the cover. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue didn't open it immediately. Instead, he calmed himself down and adjusted his state of mind to the most peaceful level. Opening the secret manual, Ziyue immediately began to read it. As expected of an external forging cultivation method, the training of the physical body is extremely detailed. It's just a pity. Half an hour later, Ziyue finished reading the entire secret manual and couldn't help but sigh. The 5 stages of the golden body were divided into 5 levels in detail. The first part was the skin, the second part was the flesh, the third part was the tendons and bones, the fourth part was the bone marrow, and the fifth part was the golden body. However, it was a pity that the entire secret manual only introduced the first 3 stages of the training method. As for the 4th stage of the bone marrow and the 5th stage of the golden body, the language was vague and vague. The first 3 stages of the 5 stages of the golden body actually coincide with the 3 levels of the external forging realm. Does this mean that my understanding of the external forging realm is still wrong? In fact, the external forging tendons and bones isn't the peak of the external forging realm. Above that, I still need to cultivate to the external forging bone marrow and the golden body realm to be considered the peak of the external forging realm. Ziyue suddenly had a clearer understanding of the specific strength division of the external forging realm. Previously, the only information he had about the external forging realm was from Sun No. Although the other party was in the external forging realm, he had only cultivated to the outer forging skin membrane realm. He obviously didn't know much about the peak of the external forging realm. However, from the introduction of the 5 sections of the golden body, although this book is somewhat incomplete, it is actually an external forging cultivation method that can be directly cultivated to the peak of the external forging realm. It's just that because the last 2 parts are missing, it isn't valued by many experts. According to the description of the external forging golden body in the 5th section of the secret book, this external forging cultivation method is definitely not that simple. It might even be an external forging cultivation method that surpasses the iron cloth technique of the Tai martial arts school, the 6 or 7 unhindered of the Wu Wei escort agency, or even the scorching sun gang's Vajralok jade tactics. Ziyue looked at the 5th stage of the 5 sections of the golden body, which was described as the body of Vajra, the strength of 10,000 caddies, and couldn't help but let his imagination run wild. What a pity, Ziyue sighed again. It was a pity that this external forging cultivation method was incomplete. Only the 3rd stage of the cultivation method could be cultivated. Although the 4th and 5th stage had an introduction, there was no specific description of the cultivation method. Soon, Ziyue composed himself again. No matter what, through these 5 sections of the golden body, he could continue to cultivate and improve his strength. As for the missing 4th and 5th stage, although it was a pity, he wasn't too worried. At that time, he could naturally switch to the scorching sun gang's Vajralok jade tactics, and his strength could still smoothly increase. The purpose of a martial artist's stance is to strengthen the chi and blood, and then use the chi and blood to nourish the strength. External forging cultivation is a completely new use of the strength, using the strength to refine the body, so that the strength of the body can reach an inhuman state. Ziyue stood in the room and took a deep breath. As the chi and blood flowed, waves of strength were immediately produced. Gather the strength and form it into one. Then control this strength and slowly release it outwards, scouring the skin back and forth with a unique frequency. Ziyue integrated the strength. In an instant, the scattered strength was controlled by him and gradually gathered into one. This strength, under his control, began to flow according to the unique blood vessels and meridian circulation route of the 5 sections of the golden body. This circulation route was actually the basic principle of the 5 sections of the golden body. Regardless of whether it was the outer refining of the skin, the outer refining of the flesh, the outer refining of the tendons and bones, they all followed this circulation route. Fortunately, under the perfection of the dhyana stance, he knew the blood vessels and meridians in the body like the back of his hand. After memorizing the circulation route, he naturally could not make any mistakes. It's a little painful, but it's still bearable. Ziyue felt the strength scouring through his meridians and finally began his first cultivation. Carefully, he slowly released the strength according to the unique frequency, constantly scouring the skin on the surface of his body. It was like being pricked by needles, but there was also a strange, cool feeling. Strands of sweat flowed out continuously as the strength scoured. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. As time passed, countless fine beads of sweat gradually appeared on Ziyue's body. Vaguely, there were also strands of blood that were gradually expelled. 10 minutes later, Ziyue's eyes turned slightly dark. Finally, he couldn't hold on and stopped his first cultivation. Chapter 46. As expected, external tempering isn't that simple. The consumption of qi and blood is really too great. Ziyue panted, feeling that he was severely lacking in strength. He could not even complete 1 cycle in 10 minutes of cultivation, but he could not hold on any longer. Moreover, Ziyue grinned as he looked at the tiny beads of sweat on his body and the horrifying bloodstains that had gathered in the beads of sweat. These bloodstains were the extravasated blood that was expelled from Ziyue's skin when he was rinsing. No wonder they say that the poor study and the rich practice martial arts. At this rate, without a huge amount of meat to replenish, who can withstand such a consumption of qi and blood? Ziyue thought to himself and could not help but look at his attribute panel. Name: Ziyue strength 207, cannot be improved. Speed 191, cannot be improved. Physique 209, cannot be improved. Mentality 180, cannot be improved. Martial arts, perfect meditation stance, cannot be improved. Stage 5 golden body, cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes, can be improved. Great mastery of straight punch, cannot be improved. Immortal art, purple chi divine observation technique, cannot be improved. Spirit energy 672 however, I have to admit that even though it's my first time cultivating, the effects are still very obvious. Ziyue compared his previous data and immediately realized that his strength, speed, and physique had all improved slightly. Moreover, he did feel a sense of relief. He pinched his skin. He did not know if it was an illusion, but it seemed to be more flexible than before. After resting for a while, Ziyue finally recovered some strength. With my current qi and blood, if I continue cultivating, it will result in a deficit of qi and blood. I won't be able to recover without a few days. Fortunately, Qianming happened to send a few qi and blood pills. With the help of the pills, it should not be a problem to recover my qi and blood for cultivation. No matter what, I must complete 1 cycle of cultivation today. Ziyue ignored the bloodstains on his body and took out the qi and blood pills that Qianming had sent. Because he had already tried the effects before, he was confident in the effects of the vitality pill. In addition, he was indeed in a serious deficit. His stomach was empty, and the sound of stomach acid squirming could be heard. Therefore, this time, he took out 2 vitality pills and swallowed them. In an instant, the vitality pill entered his stomach, and a scorching heat spread to every corner of his body. His qi and blood, which had been depleted from his cultivation, were quickly replenished. It was as if there was an inexhaustible amount of energy in his body. His vigorous qi and blood seemed to be burning, forming wisps of smoke above his head and around his body. Not daring to hesitate, Ziyue once again assumed the posture and began cultivating. Driven by his qi and blood, the force in his body was quickly formed. Then, it slowly moved along his meridians and veins. At the same time, the force that was constantly generated was also slowly released, washing his skin. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. The chi and blood pills seemed to contain an endless amount of chi and blood power, and all of them were converted into force by him, becoming the nourishment for strengthening his skin membrane. Half an hour later, Ziyue let out a long sigh of relief. He had finally completed a cycle. At this moment, his entire body was almost completely covered in blood. It was dry and congealed together, looking extremely horrifying. Feeling that he still had some strength, he quickly got up and walked out of the room. Under the moonlight, when no one was looking, he fetched water from the well and quickly cleaned himself. If blood is discharged from my body every time I cultivate in the future, I have to be careful. Otherwise, if some experienced martial artists see me, they will definitely discover my secret. After cleaning himself, Ziyue's mind quickly flashed with this thought. He actually wanted to move out and find a place to live. He did not know much about the apprentices, but he knew that all official disciples could find a place to live outside. They just had to report their address to the sect. However, with his status, if he really wanted to move out, there would be many things that he could not explain. It seems that I have to prepare in advance before I start cultivating. Ziyue walked slowly toward his room. As for the fact that others could tell that he was cultivating the external forging technique, he wasn't too worried about this. For martial artists, whether they were external forging or internal forging, as long as they did not reveal the corresponding strength, it would be difficult for others to detect their specific realm. As long as he did not reveal the fact that he was external forging in the Scorching Sun Gang, even his master, sect leader Lu Dong, who had already cultivated inner chi, would not be able to detect his difference. In the next few days, Ziyue practiced martial arts in the training field during the day. He practiced the straight connecting fist and the 18 consecutive strikes. At night, he quietly stayed in his room and cultivated the 5th stage golden body of the external forging technique. After a few days, he felt his progress almost every day. His various attributes were almost steadily increasing. Name: Ziyue Strength 2, 23, cannot be improved. Speed 2, 02, cannot be improved. Physique 2, 27, cannot be improved. Mental Strength 1, 80, cannot be improved. Martial Arts, perfect meditation stance, cannot be improved. 5th stage golden body, cannot be improved. Initial success of the 18 consecutive strikes can be improved. Great success of the straight connecting fist, cannot be improved. Immortal Technique, purple chi divine observation technique, cannot be improved. Spiritual energy, 672-inch strength and physique have both increased by 0, 15 and above. Even my speed has finally broken through 2 points and is on the same level as my other strength and physique. The only pity is that my mental strength attribute still did not increase. Ziyue glanced at the attribute panel. He knew that with his current strength, if he were to face old 6th Lu again, he would probably be able to defeat him even more easily. However, on this day, his chi and blood pills had finally been completely used up. 12 chi and blood pills were 12 taels of silver. A few days ago, he would never have thought that he would be so extravagant. The chi and blood pills have been used up. If I want to cultivate smoothly from now on, I can only use chi and blood pills. Or, I can concoct a medicinal bath according to the description on the 5th stage golden body. The medicinal bath recipe mentioned on the 5th stage golden body flashed through Ziyue's mind. The other ingredients were ordinary. Ziyue estimated that he could buy them in a pharmacy. However, one of the main ingredients, as far as he knew, was very expensive. Moreover, even if he had the money, it might be difficult to buy it. Tomorrow, I'll use the chi and blood pills to test the effects. Maybe I can use it to complete 2 or even 3 cycles of external forging. Ziyue was eager to give it a try. Although the chi and blood pills were good, 2 of them could at most allow him to complete 1 cycle of external forging. The chi and blood pills were obviously much better than the chi and blood pills. It should not be difficult to double the effect. Also, Tomorrow is the 70th birthday of the Lord Guardian's father, as mentioned by Master. I might have to go to the pharmacy to see if I can concoct the medicinal bath recipe. Also, I have to make preparations for the talisman drawing. Ziyue laid on the bed and thought to himself. Soon, he fell asleep. Chapter 47. Early the next morning, Ziyue was called to the hall of the front yard by the young man who was in charge of chores last time. This time, he deliberately asked for the young man's name and learned that he was called Lu Heng. He seemed to be the nephew of the sect leader, Lu Dong. Because of his lack of talent in martial arts, he could only be a chores apprentice. But in the sect, no one dared to look down on him. His master, Lu Dong, had already prepared suitable clothes for him. An exquisite white robe and a small military officer's hat made him look extraordinarily handsome, like a rich young master. Not bad. You didn't embarrass me. Lu Dong nodded, called out, and led the way. There was a carriage waiting at the door. Ziyue followed the master into the carriage. Soon, Lu Heng's exclamation was heard. The carriage moved and rushed to the restaurant. You should have started practicing martial arts now. What do you have? In the carriage, his master, Lu Dong, asked casually. Uncle Son of the Pearl Restaurant taught me the 18 consecutive moves. Ziyue thought for a while and hid the one-word connecting fist that he learned from old Mr. Ho. Saber technique? Not bad. Although I don't practice saber techniques, I know that saber techniques emphasize sharpness and killing. If you want to achieve something, you have to go through a lot of fights and cultivate killing intent. At your age, you probably haven't even killed. If you want to cultivate killing intent and achieve something in saber techniques, it will be very difficult. Lu Dong said with a smile. How can I cultivate killing intent? Ziyue thought of something and asked. Do you know who has the strongest killing intent among ordinary people? Lu Dong asked. Butchers. Ziyue suddenly thought of the butchers he saw in the slaughterhouse. When slaughtering pigs and cows, they looked indifferent and expressionless. But the indifference to life left a deep impression on him. Now that he thought about it, wasn't that killing intent? It's the butcher. Lu Dong nodded and said, if you really want to practice your knife skills, I can arrange for you to go to the Scorching Sun Gang slaughterhouse. Not only can you practice your saber art, but it can also increase your killing intent. As your master, I will not specially guide you in your cultivation of martial skills, but I can provide you with the best cultivation environment. I will help you arrange for the cultivation of your martial arts techniques and the supply of resources for external tempering in the future. But how much you can achieve is still up to you. Thank you, Master. Ziyue was excited and quickly said, I like saber techniques. I'm willing to go to the slaughterhouse. Originally, because he had left the Pearl Restaurant, he had temporarily lost the channel to obtain soul energy. Unexpectedly, there was a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. From his master, he once again had the opportunity to enter the slaughterhouse. This way, his soul power could increase once again. This could be said to be of great help to him in increasing his strength. Unknowingly, the carriage had already stopped. Wangjiang Restaurant. After getting out of the carriage, Ziyue looked at the plaque above. Wangjiang Restaurant was built next to the river and was the largest restaurant in the entire Qingatown. Compared to it, the Pearl Restaurant was still somewhat lacking. And as the chief official of Qingatown, Yang Zhengling's father's birthday banquet naturally had to be of the highest standard. It was normal for the birthday banquet to be held at Wangjiang Restaurant. At this moment, there was an endless stream of people. There were all kinds of important people in the town who had prepared gifts. Gate Master Lu Dong led Ziyue all the way into the restaurant. Behind them, Lu Heng naturally followed with the birthday gifts. Gate Master of the Scorching Sun Gang, Heaven Binding Hands Lu Dong, present a pair of 7 apertures Rui scepters and 100 taels of gold. Following the announcement of the votes, Ziyue followed Lu Dong into the restaurant. Immediately, countless surprised voices were heard. The 7 apertures Rui scepters were rare treasures and very expensive. 100 taels of gold was 1,000 taels of silver. It was enough for a family of 3 to live a wealthy life. This gift could not be said to be small. However, when they thought of Lu Dong's identity as the gate master of the Scorching Sun Gang, Most people were not surprised. Although the Scorching Sun Gang in Qinghetown was only a branch, its strength was enough to be ranked in the top 3. As the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang in Qinghetown, it was normal for Lu Dong to be so generous. Then, countless people enthusiastically greeted Lu Dong. Even Gate Master Yang Zhengling walked over with a smile and thanked him. "Brother Lu, thank you for coming to my father's birthday banquet. How can I not come to old Master Yang's birthday banquet?" Lu Dong said with a smile. "Huh?" Yang Zhengling laughed loudly. Then, he looked at Ziyue beside him and asked, "This is my new disciple, Mount Ziyue. Come and greet the gate master." Lu Dong reprimanded him, but his face was full of smiles. "Ziyue greets Gate Master Yang." Ziyue hurried forward and said respectfully. When he first came to Qinghetown with Uncle Ming, he had seen Master Yang's elegance from afar on the beheading platform. Later, he found out that Master Yang was an expert who had cultivated his inner qi long ago. Therefore, the respect on his face was somewhat sincere. "Good, not bad. I haven't congratulated Brother Lu on having a good disciple." Yang Zhengling smiled and nodded. Then, he chatted with Lu Dong for a while. However, he was, after all, one of the hosts of this birthday banquet. He needed to greet the guests, so he quickly left. At this time, there were naturally other people who came to greet Lu Dong. Not only were there the leaders of Qinghetown, but there were also the 2 protectors and 5 supervisors of the Scorching Sun Gang. 4 of them were also present. With Lu Heng's explanation, Ziyue also got to know some people. There were naturally people who were interested in this new disciple of the Radiant Sun faction leader. Not only were there many who were sizing him up, there were also some who were deliberately trying to get close to him, causing the atmosphere around him to become quite lively for a while. "Brother Zhao, he has stolen all the limelight from you." Before this, when it came to the younger generation of the Scorching Sun Gang, who didn't know that you, Zhao Gongyi, were the strongest, not far away, 2 teenagers, one tall and one short, were standing. The shorter one of them said sourly, "So what? He is only an apprentice now. He only has some prestige because he is the disciple of the leader. When he starts forging in a few years, I will have already jumped out of this small place called Qinghetown and gone to Wujiang County. Why would I care about him?" Zhao Gongyi snorted coldly and said unmoved. At least at this time, when others spread the news, they would say that Ziyue's talent is more outstanding than yours, Brother Zhao. In the future, he will definitely surpass Brother Zhao. Wouldn't that damage your reputation? The shorter teenager continued to provoke. "What can I do when the mouths of others are in the mouths of others?" Zhao Gongyi glanced at the teenager disdainfully. Looking at Ziyue in the distance, his eyes couldn't help but flicker. The teenager wanted to say more, but suddenly, the sound of counting tickets rang out again. And this time, it seemed to be especially high. Wudong Mountain's 5th Dao Master sends a bottle of vitality pills, a bottle of energy cultivation pills, and 10 house guarding talismans, along with 2 disciples. Chapter 48. In an instant, the banquet fell silent. Then, it quickly became noisy again. "Channel Master Wu Tong, I didn't expect Channel Master Wu Tong to come too." Channel Master Wu Tong is a person who cultivates immortal magic. It is said that he has mastered magic that can turn stone into gold and create something out of nothing. Usually, many people ask for him, but he is rarely seen. I didn't expect him to come to old Master Yang's birthday banquet this time, and even bring such valuable gifts as the Vitality Pill and the Vitality Pill. Old Master Yang's 70th birthday is the time when his spirit is declining and his qi is weak. These Vitality Pills and Vitality Pills are just right for him. Moreover, they are both very expensive. They should be the most valuable gifts among all the people who came to celebrate his birthday, right? In the midst of the discussion, everyone's eyes were fixed on the door, wanting to see Channel Master Wu Tong's elegance. Even the guard Yang Zhengling and the host of the birthday banquet, old Master Yang, hurriedly got up and went to the door of the restaurant to welcome him. Ziyue had heard of Channel Master Wu Tong's reputation long ago, so he was naturally curious. Soon, an old Taoist with a long goatee, dressed in a green Taoist robe, with a ruddy face like a child, and a Taoist hairpin in his hair, walked in side by side with Yang Zhengling and Old Master Yang. Behind them were two Taoists, one fat and one thin. The fatter Taoist was in his 30s or 40s, with a thick beard above his mouth. His eyes were small and almost invisible when he squinted. The other one looked to be in his 20s, dressed in a purple-black Taoist robe. His face was sallow, and he looked a little tall and thin. These two were obviously Channel Master Wu Tong's two disciples. From the others' discussion, Zhua learned that the fat middle-aged Taoist was Channel Master Wu Tong's eldest disciple, Zhang Yuchong, and the young man was the second disciple, Wu Hao. As he was sizing them up, the young Taoist, Wu Hao, suddenly turned his eyes in Zhua's direction, paused for a moment, and then looked away. Zhua's heart skipped a beat, and his pupils suddenly shrank. Just as the man turned his head, he suddenly saw a large mole beside his ear. He suddenly recalled the description of the evil cultivator by the two hooligans he had taught a lesson to some time ago. His face was sallow, and he had a large mole by his ear. Correspondingly, wouldn't this match with Wu Hao? In particular, when Bai Ziwa looked down and saw the yellow gourd hanging on Wu Hao's waist, he immediately confirmed his identity. Wu Hao, the disciple of the Five Passages being, is that evil cultivator who raises ghosts. Ziyue's mind was shaken. He lowered his head slightly, and his eyes shrunk. Wait, he also looked in my direction and paused for a moment. Did he recognize me? Ziyue's heart tightened. He looked at Wu Hao again and realized that Wu Hao wasn't looking in his direction. Instead, he was following behind the fifth channel head and meeting with the other leaders. Soon, Taoist Wudong and the others arrived at the banquet. Ziyue's master, Lu Dong, also stood up to greet them. He wasn't too enthusiastic, but he wasn't too cold either. Both sides also pulled their disciples to meet. Ziyue greeted the young Taoist, Wu Hao, and finally confirmed that the other party had recognized him. However, he doesn't seem to know that I've already recognized his identity. Looking at the other party pretending to be calm, Ziyue thought silently to himself. His face didn't reveal any abnormality. Master, who is this fifth channel head? Why is almost everyone so respectful to him? After they walked away, Ziyue asked his master, Lu Dong, with a curious look. Fifth channel head is a person who cultivates the way of immortality. He's good at dealing with all kinds of evil. Although we martial artists can deal with ordinary ghosts, we're not good at it. At this time, we need to ask someone like Fifth Channel Head to help us. Over the years, the major families and forces of Qingatown have more or less received favors from Fifth Channel Head. Naturally, they respect him. Lu Dong said with a complicated tone, "What's the difference between cultivating the way of immortality and practicing martial arts? I heard that cultivating the way of immortality can lead to longevity. Is that true?" Ziyue asked with a frown. Of course, cultivating the way of immortality has its magical aspects. I don't know much about the specifics. I only know that the strong can indeed prolong their lives. However, it's a bit exaggerated to say that they can lead to longevity. Moreover, it's not impossible for us to live longer by practicing martial arts to strengthen ourselves. As far as I know, there are many martial artists who can live to more than 150 years old. Lu Dong hesitated for a moment and said, "Then are there really that many ghosts in our Qingatown?" Now, he already knew that martial arts and way of immortality coexisted in this world. The comparison between the two could be seen from his master's tone. Warriors seemed to lack confidence when facing immortal cultivators. However, he hadn't heard much about ghosts in Qingatown. The first time was when the Tai I Dojo, Tang Lian, and the other two families were haunted. It was said that Fifth Channel Head took action to resolve it. The second time was when his cousin encountered a ghost. Although he killed the female ghost, he also offended the young Taoist, Wu Hao. From there, he discovered the secret of Wu Hao raising ghosts. It was also because of this that he couldn't help but suspect that there was something fishy about this haunted incident. Of course, he already knew that ghosts really existed. However, was the appearance of these ghosts driven by Fifth Channel Head? It's not much, but it's not little either. You don't have to be afraid of ordinary ghosts. The truly terrifying ones are monsters or even demons. However, Chinatown's surroundings are remote and resources aren't abundant. Although there are such existences, they don't appear frequently. Once they appear, the government will come out and ask people to kill them. You don't have to be too worried. Lu Dong explained faintly and didn't say anything else. Hearing this, Ziyue's heart skipped a beat. He originally guessed that this ghost incident was directed and acted out by Fifth Channel Head. Now that he heard that there are monsters, or even demons, he immediately understood that his understanding of this world was still too shallow. What he saw was still too one-sided. He couldn't even see the tip of the iceberg. It was obvious that there were relatively more ghosts. After all, after people died, or even animals, they could turn into ghosts. Therefore, it was relatively normal to see ghosts. However, other than ghosts, there were other species that were obviously stronger and more terrifying. For example, monsters or demons. These existences were extremely dangerous to people. Once they appeared, the government would often come out and send people or even ask people to kill them, perhaps in order to not cause panic among the people. These things were obviously kept secret. Therefore, Ziyue rarely heard about monsters and demons. After all, his master, Lu Dong, was the leader of the Scorching Sun Gang. Naturally, he was very knowledgeable. He might even be asked by the government to attack monsters and other evil existences. Therefore, he had some understanding of these existences. Chapter 49. Fear often came from the unknown. After confirming the evil cultivator's true identity, Ziyue was not as uneasy as before. During this time, he naturally inquired about their situation. He knew that Wu Hao had been a disciple for 5 years. In terms of strength, he should also be at the outer forging level. However, because he cultivated immortal techniques, his methods were strange and difficult to guard against, so his specific strength was hard to say. However, although Wu Hao's identity was extraordinary, he was also a disciple of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch leader. He was not weaker than Wu Hao. He was confident that Wu Hao would definitely not dare to make a move on him openly. Therefore, after the banquet ended, Ziyue returned to the Scorching Sun Gang's branch with his master and the others and left secretly again. Although I've already started outer forging, I still haven't started. In terms of strength, I'm naturally far inferior to Wu Hao. Regardless of whether Wu Hao will have scruples because of my current identity, I have to increase my strength as soon as possible. Ziyue knew that Wu Hao had already revealed his malice. The conflict between the two would erupt sooner or later. He was not strong enough at the moment, so he naturally felt a strong sense of danger. Now, other than continuing outer forging, the only way to quickly increase his strength was to continue outer forging and the various magical talismans in the 100 Talisman catalog. Ziyue touched the heavy silver in his money bag and quickly stepped into a brush and ink shop. This shop looked quite old. In addition to brushes and ink, there was rice paper, incense burners, sachets, and so on. It was very complete. At this moment, there was a shopkeeper sitting behind the counter, leisurely humming a play with an intoxicated look on his face. "Shopkeeper, do you sell weasel hairbrushes here?" Ziyue waited for the other party to finish singing before finally asking. "Yes, of course. Not only do I have weasel hairbrushes here, but I also have sheep hairbrushes, purple hairbrushes, double hairbrushes, and so on. The prices are high and low, and they're all customized according to the material used in the hair. Which one do you want?" The shopkeeper came back to his senses. Although Ziyue was young, his clothes were not ordinary. He did not look down on him and hurriedly said, "Take a few out for me to take a look." Talisman brushes were the most important in making talismans. He naturally valued them and had to take a look first. "All right," the shopkeeper replied and nimbly took out a few brushes from the cabinet. The body of the brush was roughly the same, but the tip of the brush was slightly different. Ziyue carefully compared them, shook his head, and said, "Do you have a better one?" If these brushes were used to practice calligraphy, there would naturally be no problem. However, He was crafting talismans, and what he needed was a type of spirituality. This spirituality was just like the wisps of purple chi in his purple chi divine observation technique. Others could not see or touch it, but those with a sensitive mind could feel it. Ziyue's spirit was around 1.8, far surpassing that of an ordinary person. Naturally, he could sense this spirituality. However, it was a pity that none of these brushes had such spirituality. Moreover, he also observed that the tips of these brushes did not seem to be made of weasel tail hair, which was specially required for weasel hair brushes. Instead, they were made of rabbit hair, wool, goose feather. They all seemed to be suitable for writing, but the price difference was huge. Looks like he's an expert. The shopkeeper's face twitched unnaturally. He hurriedly took out a few brushes from the cabinet again. This time, Ziyue's eyes finally lit up. These 3 brushes were obviously much more exquisite than the previous ones. Moreover, he did sense a unique spirituality from the tip of the brush that could be used as a talisman brush. However, this spirituality was very weak. It should be made of weasel tail hair mixed with other ordinary hair colors. Therefore, Ziyue opened his mouth again and said, "Do you have a better one? If not, I'm leaving." "Yes, definitely. This time, I'm going to take out all my cards." The shopkeeper's face stiffened. He did not expect this kid to have such good eyesight. He smiled helplessly and finally took out a few brushes from a drawer on the upper level of the counter. Seeing these brushes, Ziyue's breathing obviously quickened. Spirituality. Very strong spirituality. Even though there were a total of 5 brushes placed together, Ziyue still fixed his gaze on the brush on the left at the first moment. It was a brush with a dark yellow barrel and a bluish-purple weasel hair at the tip. Compared to the other weasel hair brushes, it did not seem to be too eye-catching. However, the spirituality it contained was the strongest among them. "How much are these weasel hair brushes?" Ziyue asked calmly. "These are all good things at the bottom of the store. They were all made by the master brush maker, Master Donjia. Look at the end of the brush. There are 2 words Donjia engraved on it. I won't take it out for ordinary people. Since you know the value, I won't ask you for the price. 20 taels each," the shopkeeper said with a chrysanthemum-like smile on his face. 10 taels. Ziyue bargained with no expression. "Impossible, this is—" The shopkeeper habitually opened his mouth, but was stopped by Ziyue's voice. 9 taels. "No, even if you want to bargain, you can't do this. How can you lower the price as you bargain?" 8 taels. Looking at the shopkeeper's expression, Ziyue was more certain of the shopkeeper's bottom line and said calmly, Okay, I give up. 10 taels it is. How many do you want?" The shopkeeper waved his hand and said with a bitter face, "One will do." As he spoke, Ziyue hurriedly took the one that caught his eye in his hand. Sensing that the spirituality in the brush was much stronger than the other brushes, he was secretly excited. There was definitely something unusual about this brush. However, in order to prevent the shopkeeper from regretting, he could only resist the idea of probing and continued. "In addition to the brushes, I also need some 100-fold paper. Let's start with 10 sheets. 20 taels in total." The shopkeeper did not ask for details. After taking out the 100-fold paper from the counter, he reported the price. Although Ziyue was a little reluctant, he still took out 20 taels of silver from his money bag and put it on the counter. The 100-fold paper was used for scientific examinations. It was soft and smooth. It was said that it had to go through hundreds of processes, so it was called the 100-fold paper. A 100-fold paper was 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. It was normal to ask for 1 tael. Ziyue naturally did not continue to bargain. "I have the talisman brush and paper. Now I'm just short of cinnabar." Walking out of the brush and ink shop, Ziyue hesitated in his heart and quickly thought, cinnabar should be sold in ordinary pharmacies. It just so happens that I'm cultivating the 5th stage of the golden body. Now that I've used up all the energy in blood pills, there are only 2 energy and blood pills left. I don't think I can last long. I can buy some medicinal herbs and soak in the medicinal bath according to the medicinal bath formula to strengthen my energy and blood for cultivation. After making up his mind, Ziyue's goal was much clearer. He quickly found a pharmacy and walked in. Of course, for the sake of secrecy, he naturally would not gather all the medicinal herbs needed for the medicinal bath formula in one pharmacy. He went to 3 pharmacies before he finally gathered 5 sets. What made him feel lucky was that he bought one of the main ingredients that he thought was difficult to gather. Although it was more expensive, it was not missing. Chapter 50. Back at his residence, Ziyue took out all the things he had bought this time and put them away properly. Talisman pen, 100-fold paper, cinnabar, and 5 portions of medicinal bath materials. Looking at these materials, Ziyue took a deep breath. Talisman pen, 100-fold paper, cinnabar, and other materials that could be ground into cinnabar ink cost him a total of 25 taels of silver, which was not a lot. However, 5 portions of medicinal bath materials cost him a total of 30 taels of silver, which was 6 taels of silver per portion. Calculating carefully, it was equivalent to 6 vitality pills. I hope the effect is worth the price. Ziyue frowned slightly. It was only because he had killed Old Sixth Lu that his financial resources had increased a lot. Otherwise, he would not have been willing to spend 30 taels of silver just to buy 5 portions of medicinal bath materials. However, at this time, he did not have the intention to cultivate the 5th stage of the golden body to test the medicinal bath's effect. Instead, he eagerly picked up the weasel hairbrush. There's indeed something unusual about it. However, what is really unusual about this brush is not the weasel hair on the tip, but the body of the brush. The body of the brush looks like a bamboo joint, but it is actually made from the small bones of some animal. As for the weasel hair on the tip of the brush, it is just the tip of an ordinary weasel tail. It does not lack spirituality, but it is not as strong as the body of the brush. Ziyue carefully sized it up and used his mental strength to sense it. Soon, a look of surprise appeared on his face. The body of an ordinary brush was made of ordinary bamboo, which was simple and malleable. However, the body of this weasel hairbrush was made of small animal bones. However, he knew very well that ordinary animal bones could not possibly have spirituality. Could it be that this brush was made from some kind of strange beast, or even the demon that Master mentioned before? Ziyue guessed, but soon gave up on thinking about it. No matter what, he had made a fortune. The success rate of drawing talismans with this kind of spiritual brush would be much higher. If he really met someone who knew his stuff, the price would be far more than 10 taels of silver. It was possible that it would be more than 100 taels of silver. 100 stacks of paper for 1 piece, 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. But in reality, if you want to make talisman paper, you don't need to use such a large stack. Ziyue thought to himself. He quickly pulled out a piece of paper and began to fold and cut it. A few minutes later, he had cut out a total of 36 strips of paper of uniform size. Finally, Ziyue ground the cinnabar into powder. Then, he added water into the mixture. Soon a bowl of blood-red ink that was as thick as ink appeared in front of him. Talisman brush, talisman paper, and talisman ink are all here. Now, I can start drawing talismans for real. Ziyue took out a piece of talisman paper and placed it on the table. Then, he carefully took out a jade pendant and pressed a corner of it. Closing his eyes to rest, Ziyue started to carefully recall the drawing method and structure of a talisman in the 100 Talisman Catalog. Although ordinary people can draw talismans, the requirements for the person who draws them are extremely high. He needed to calm his chi and concentrate fully. Moreover, when drawing the talisman, he needed to breathe without stopping. If there was even the slightest mistake, the talisman that was drawn would only be a piece of ordinary paper and would be completely useless. Ziyue had long ago memorized the things that he needed to prepare and pay attention to when drawing talismans in his mind. Before he started drawing talismans, he even firmly remembered every stroke of the 3 talismans that he was going to draw today. 10 minutes later, Ziyue finally raised his right hand and held the talisman brush. After dipping the brush in cinnabar ink, he took a deep breath and moved the brush to the top of the talisman paper. Thanks to his grandfather in his previous life, Ziyue had also specially practiced calligraphy. Although he had already neglected practice after growing up, the way he held the talisman brush was extremely professional. Correspondingly, his hand was also extremely stable. For his first time drawing talismans, Ziyue would naturally choose a relatively simple talisman to make. Therefore, even though he yearned for the soul-subduing talisman, Vajra talisman, and spirit fire talisman that could unleash powerful effects and a certain degree of lethality, nevertheless, he still obediently chose the cleansing talisman, spirit calming talisman, and house guarding talisman as his first choices for drawing talismans. These three talismans were all relatively simple talismans, and were also the most suitable for beginners to practice. Ziyue's first choice was the cleansing talisman. Lifting the talisman brush, Ziyue's arms stiffly hung in the air. Then, he finally put the brush down. Infusing his mental energy, the talisman brush fell, and with a stroke, Ziyue's expression changed slightly at this moment. Heavy. At this moment, the brush in his hand seemed to be as heavy as 1,000 caddies, making it difficult for him to draw the next stroke. Only at this moment did he finally understand why he had to choose a talisman brush with spirituality to draw talismans. Because when he infused his mental energy, there would be an inexplicable pulling force that would guide a kind of power from the void into the talisman. An ordinary brush would simply not be able to withstand such a heavy pressure. Gathering his thoughts, he hurriedly wanted to continue to pick up the brush and complete the next stroke. However, the previous stroke had directly shaken his mind. When he continued to draw the talisman, the heavy force had already disappeared, although he still finished drawing the talisman in one go. However, he had already clearly understood that he had failed. Is this talisman drawing? As expected, it's equally difficult. It's just a slight distraction, and all the effort is gone. The talisman has become a piece of scrap paper. Ziyue looked at the talisman that had been drawn in front of him. When the words were drawn in the first stroke, there were actually some gaps. Although it was very subtle, it was completely exposed in his eyes. Naturally, there was not the slightest bit of power in this talisman. Continue. Taking a deep breath, Ziyue quickly gathered his thoughts. From the beginning, he knew that talisman drawing would not be that simple, and he had long been prepared to fail countless times. Although the failure on the first stroke was somewhat out of his expectations, it was not unacceptable. Soon, the second stroke of talisman drawing began again. This time, Ziyue was already prepared. His mind was completely immersed in it. The whistling of the cold wind outside, the flickering light of the oil lamp in the room, and even his own breathing were all completely ignored by him. In his eyes, there was only the talisman paper and the talisman drawing. The talisman brush that was covered in cinnabar ink fell once again. On the talisman brush, a faint spiritual light could be seen flickering on it. Then, his mental energy seemed to be drawn and directly poured into it. In an instant, the talisman brush in his hand became heavy. Ziyue directly pushed the talisman brush and began to draw the talisman. One stroke, one press, one horizontal, one vertical. When he had pushed the talisman brush nearly halfway, the strength in his arm became unstable and he paused slightly. Failed again. Ziyue sighed and quickly tore the talisman paper apart and replaced it with a new one. He did not believe that he could not even draw the simplest cleansing talisman. Chapter 51. 1 piece, 2 pieces, 3 pieces. Soon, there were 7 or 8 ruined pieces of talisman paper on the ground. When Ziyue wanted to take out another piece of talisman paper and start drawing talismans, a wave of dizziness came over him, making his body unsteady. My mental strength is indeed insufficient. From the beginning, he knew that talismans were magical. Although ordinary people could draw them, it was extremely taxing on their mental strength. Ziyue's mental strength attribute of 1. 8 was already insufficient after drawing 7 or 8 pieces. This was even after all the talismans had failed. Moreover, The talisman brush was full of spirituality and could conserve his mental strength to a certain extent. After resting for a full hour and feeling that his mental strength had completely recovered, Ziwa once again stood beside the table. It wasn't as if he had gained nothing from his previous 7 or 8 failures. Continuous failure was actually a process of constantly finding mistakes. After the previous accumulation, he could now smoothly draw the cleansing talisman to 80%. Next, he was confident that he would be able to draw this talisman completely soon. Calming down and concentrating, Ziwa dipped the talisman brush in cinnabar ink again. Then, he steadily landed on the 100 pieces of paper that had been cut. Pick up the brush, write, outline, with full concentration. Ziwa's hands were steady and powerful. Although there seemed to be a heavy pressure, he did not stop and completed most of the talisman's writing. Soon, the talisman was once again written on the place where he had failed previously. Previously, Ziwa had maintained the same driving force as before because he was drawing the last part of the talisman. However, he did not expect that the later part of the talisman would require more force. So there was a moment of stagnation. This moment of stagnation directly led to the failure of the talisman drawing. This time, who was already prepared, increased the mental strength that he poured into the talisman brush. The talisman brush, which was full of spirituality, completed the last part of the talisman extremely smoothly under the push of the increased mental strength. Almost in one go, the last stroke of the talisman was completed. Is it done? Ziwa could not wait to look at the talisman. Coincidentally, he saw a faint layer of light flashing on the talisman. The talisman seemed to be the same talisman, but when Ziwa picked it up, he felt a trace of weight. It was at least 10 times heavier than the previous piece of paper. Moreover, when he looked at the talisman again, he could clearly sense that there was a special spirituality on this talisman. When he picked up the previous one and compared it, he could immediately see the problem. The ruined talisman looked okay, but when he compared the two, it was undoubtedly dull. I finally succeeded. Ziwa was excited. He didn't stop. While he still had the feeling, he started drawing talismans again. 1 sheet, 2 sheets, 3 sheets. When by Ziwa finished the 3rd painting, he finally stopped. With my mental strength, I can only draw 3 or 4 at a time. If I force myself to continue, my mental strength will be depleted, and I won't feel good then. Sensing that his spiritual power was about to be overdrawn, he wisely stopped. Of the talisman, of the previous, of the talisman. However, what made him happy was that ever since he succeeded the first time, he succeeded the 2nd and 3rd time. The heaviness of the 3 cleansing talismans stacked together made him satisfied. Talisman technique is said to be a kind of Dharma spell. Now that I have 3 cleansing talismans, I can take one out and try it out. Ziwa was a little restless. Even though he knew that the talisman he drew was a success, he did not have the confidence to see the talisman in action. Not to mention, he was also eager to see the effects of the cleansing talisman. Ziwa did not dare to use it for the first time. Therefore, he looked around the room and soon saw a stack of blankets on the bed. Although the blankets were old, they were not dirty. However, there was a spot that was a little dark yellow, probably because it was not cleaned properly. Seeing this, he hurried to the side of the bed, reached out, tore the cleansing talisman, and threw it on the blankets. Almost instantaneously, a gray light flashed and enveloped the entire blanket. After a few seconds, the light faded and the cleansing talisman turned into ashes as if it had never existed. When he looked at the blankets, he was immediately stunned. Clean neat. Not only was the original dark yellow color washed away, even the entire quilt seemed to have been changed into a new one. If he did not see a hole in the corner of the blankets, he would have thought that the blankets were new. This is the power of talismans. It is indeed magical and has endless uses. Ziwa looked at the remaining 2 talismans in his hand and was excited. This is only the simplest cleansing talisman. There are 20 to 30 talismans recorded in the 100 talisman catalog. What about the other talismans? At this time, he felt a little regretful. The 100 talisman catalog that he obtained was only the first volume. Obviously, there were still the second and third volumes. If he could gather all of them, the other talismans would be even more magical and have endless power. At this time, he could not wait to start drawing talismans again and see the effects of the other talismans. However, after drawing talismans twice in a row, his mental strength was already very exhausted. After thinking about it, he decisively gave up on this idea. Just as Zeus started drawing talismans, two Taoists, one fat and one thin, were standing opposite each other in a somewhat old house. These two were the disciples of the fifth Taoist master, Zhang Yuchang, and the second disciple, Wu Hao. At this time, the fat Taoist, Zhang Yuchang, said with a smile, "Junior apprentice brother, I heard that the female ghost that you raised was killed. The female ghost is dead, but don't forget about the pure yang qi that Master asked you to collect. This is something that Master needs to refine a magic weapon." Of course I know." Wu Hao's face stiffened as he said in a muffled voice. Seeing this, Zhang Yuchang's eyes narrowed. When he thought about how the yin-yang jade pendant collected the pure yang qi, he immediately understood and said coldly, "Junior apprentice brother, you didn't lose the yin-yang jade pendant, did you? This was temporarily lent to you because Master asked you to collect the pure yang qi. If you lose it, you know Master's methods." Thinking about Master's methods, Wu Hao quivered and shivered. After a while, he said, "Of course I understand. However, now that I know who took the yin-yang jade pendant, I believe that I will be able to take it back very soon. However, I hope Senior Apprentice Brother will not report to Master in advance." As he said this, Wu Hao's eyes flickered and quickly revealed a trace of pleading. "Master has already returned to the mountain. You have at most 2 months. Take care of yourself." Zhang Yuchang shook his head and said, "Thank you for your understanding, Senior Apprentice Brother. 2 months is enough." Wu Hao's spirit rose and said, Chapter 52. Early the next morning, Zuf followed Lu Hong to the kitchen of the Scorching Sun Gang's branch with a slightly excited expression. "In our branch, there are over 100 apprentices, miscellaneous disciples, official disciples, and inner disciples. Altogether, there are over 200 people. Although not all of them eat in the branch, they are all martial artists, so their meals must be sumptuous. Naturally, the gang has also set up a slaughterhouse. Cattle, sheep, and pork are slaughtered almost every day to provide food for the disciples." On the way, Lu Hong opened his mouth and explained a lot. "The slaughterhouse is next to the kitchen. Master Li is in charge." As he spoke, Lu Hong brought Ziyue to a short old man with thick elbows. Obviously, this old man was Master Li. Master Li, this is the new disciple that the gang leader recently accepted. He likes saber techniques, so the gang leader specially arranged for him to follow you and learn for a while. Lu Hong said directly, "I just heard that the gang leader accepted a disciple. I didn't expect to see him today. All right, since it's the gang leader's order, there's no problem. I, Old Li, have no other skills, but my saber techniques for slaughtering pigs and sheep are pretty good. I'll definitely let him see blood and increase his murderous aura." Master Li smiled faintly and said confidently. Seeing this, Lu Hong didn't say much and quickly left. However, I said respectfully, "I'll have to trouble Master Li in the future. I only killed 2 white pigs today, so I didn't get much spirit energy, only 16 points. However, my spirit energy has finally started to increase. I heard from Master Li that in the next few days, the Golden Mountain pigs raised in the manor will be slaughtered. It said that these Golden Mountain pigs have a certain bloodline of mutated beasts. They're strong and their meat is dense. Correspondingly, the spirit energy obtained when they're slaughtered will definitely increase." It was already 2 hours later when he left Master Li's place. Ziyue pondered for a moment. He had never seen a Golden Mountain pig before, but he knew that in the outside world, there were also some wild beasts that evolved and became abnormally strong, thus becoming mutated beasts. Among them, those who gained sentience and even mastered magic were called demons. This Golden Mountain boar was the descendant of some kind of mutated beast and possessed the bloodline of a mutated beast. However, because they were stupid and lazy, they were captured and raised on a large scale. Now, they were gradually becoming more and more like ordinary livestock. Of course, since it had the bloodline of a mutated beast, the golden mountain pig was much more expensive and difficult to raise than a normal white pig. It was not something that ordinary people could enjoy. In the beginning, Masterly did not let him use the knife. He just explained the whole process. Masterly was not only a butcher, but also an expert in knife techniques. Perhaps because of Ziyue's identity as the disciple of the sect leader, Master Li's attitude towards him was very good. If he had any questions, he would be very happy to answer them. From his mouth, Ziyue had gained a lot. At the very least, he had a new understanding of the 18 consecutive strikes. When he was practicing the 18 consecutive strikes in his room, he did feel that he had improved. This improvement even gave him an illusion. Perhaps I don't even need to rely on soul energy to raise my 18 consecutive strikes to great accomplishment. Ziyue pondered as he practiced. The wooden knife in his hand was incomparably nimble. When he slashed in the air, the sound of air being torn apart could be heard. However, he was very clear that he was not a true martial arts genius. Others would need close to 10 years to reach great accomplishment in the 18 consecutive strikes from small accomplishment. Even if he did not need that much time, he definitely needed 2 to 3 years. If he did not want to waste time, he naturally did not need to think about what to do. Even if he did not want to rely too much on soul energy to advance. Because of the nature of obtaining soul energy, he always had a feeling that he was walking on an evil path. In the following period of time, Ziyue had a new arrangement of his time. In the morning, he naturally rushed to Master Li's place to learn. He even personally slaughtered livestock. In the morning, he practiced martial arts in the martial arts practice field. He mainly practiced the stance and the straight connecting fist, which did not cause too much of a commotion. Of course, every once in a while, Master Li would transmit energy through the air, which made him feel a sense of satisfaction. In the afternoon, Ziyue would occasionally go to the sect's library. Naturally, there were no martial techniques or cultivation methods in there. However, there were some biographies, insights, and records of the outside world, which made him intoxicated. Through this, his knowledge increased tremendously, and he also had a better understanding of this world. Of course, most of the time he stayed in his room, secretly cultivating the 5th stage of the golden body. For this, he also secretly bought a bathtub. In the end, he could not hold back and wanted to test the effects of the medicinal bath. Although there were many inconveniences, he slowly overcame them. It was also because he was accepted as a disciple by the sect leader and received a certain amount of attention. However, he was still an apprentice after all. No one would deliberately investigate and pay attention to him. After soaking in the medicinal bath, he finally truly experienced the feeling of his chi and blood soaring, and the feeling of an endless stream of energy. Lying in the bathtub, with the help of the medicinal bath's effects, he could maintain his cultivation for more than 2 hours. His energy would circulate 4 to 5 times before he felt that his chi and blood were insufficient. Based on this calculation, the effects of this medicinal bath were directly equivalent to 10 chi and blood pills. 10 chi and blood pills were 10 taels of silver, and 1 portion of medicinal bath materials was 6 taels of silver. Calculating the two, it was still extremely cost-effective. Moreover, after cultivating, he did feel that his strength had increased, and his skin had also become flexible and tough. As for the night, Ziyue devoted all his energy to drawing talismans. He was indeed obsessed with the art of talismans. In a short period of time, he had successfully drawn 3 to 4 different talismans with different effects. Just like this, 5 days later, the 5 portions of medicinal bath materials have finally been completely used up. If I calculate it carefully, I'll have to spend 6 taels of silver every day. I really spend money like water. Ziyue sighed. The poor studied while the rich practiced martial arts. This was a true example of this. Although studying also consumed money, there was a fixed amount. There was only the cost of books, the four treasures of the study, and, at most, the cost of hiring a teacher. Even the children of ordinary families could be supported. However, practicing martial arts was different. In a short period of time, Ziyue had used up 30 taels of silver. In addition to the 12 chi and blood pills from before, he had already spent more than 40 taels of silver on practicing martial arts. It could be predicted that he would spend even more in the future. It could really be described as a bottomless pit. Of course, ordinary people who practice martial arts would naturally not be as extravagant as Ziyue. Even when the official disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang practiced external forging, they relied more on their own chi and blood. Very few people would be willing to use medicinal baths, pills, and other methods. Only Ziyue was willing to spend so that he could learn the basics of external forging as soon as possible. He could really be considered an anomaly. In terms of resource consumption, there was not much difference between him and some rich young masters practicing martial arts. Chapter 53. 5 days of medicinal baths and 5 cycles of cultivating the 5 phases golden body every day has finally caused some changes to my skin membrane. Ziyue pinched his own skin and felt the softness of it. He felt a little satisfied. Even though he had not officially reached the entry level of golden body cultivation, he had already achieved a certain level of success in the cultivation of external forging techniques. At the very least, his strength, speed, and physique had greatly improved. Moreover, if one were to calculate carefully, he could be considered to have officially stepped into the realm of external forging of skin membrane, although it was only the beginning. However, the most important thing is that I finally feel that I'm about to reach the entry level of golden body cultivation. In the past few days, coupled with the 5 days of medicinal baths, Ziyue's progress in the cultivation of golden body cultivation was extremely fast. His understanding of golden body cultivation had also become more profound. Naturally, it would greatly speed up his cultivation of the outer forging technique. It really lived up to the famous saying, "You can become stronger as long as you spend money." I hope that I can reach the entry level of golden body cultivation today. Ziyue thought to himself and finally took out a porcelain bottle. There were 2 chi and blood pills in the bottle. After some discreet inquiries, he had already learned that the chi and blood pills were said to be refined using the essence of the flesh and blood of mutated beasts and various spiritual materials. A small pill contained boundless chi and blood power, and its effect was 10 times that of a chi and blood pill. He was finally ready to use the chi and blood pill when he had exhausted the materials for the medicinal baths. Moreover, he was planning to use the powerful effect of the chi and blood pill to reach the entry level of golden body cultivation in one fell swoop. Ziyue poured out a chi and blood pill from the porcelain bottle and stuffed it into his mouth without hesitation. However, Ziyue did not swallow it directly. Instead, he held it with his tongue and sucked it slightly. He knew that the chi and blood pill's medicinal effect was extremely strong. The chi and blood power transformed from the medicinal effect was very strong. If he swallowed it in one go, there would be a certain amount of waste as the chi and blood evaporated. Moreover, with the strength of his body, it was very likely that he would not be able to withstand it and would instead be injured. He only held it in his mouth and used his saliva to dissolve the chi and blood pill. Naturally, the medicinal effect would be continuously produced and would not be wasted. As the medicinal liquid entered his body, a scorching aura instantly spread to every corner of his body. The steaming chi and blood made his blood boil. Without the slightest hesitation, Ziyue immediately pushed his chi and blood to produce force. Then, it quickly flowed along his blood vessels and meridians according to the circulation route of the 5th stage golden body. As the force rotated, Ziyue also quickly controlled the force in his body and slowly washed it in the direction of the membrane. Ziyue's skin was constantly being tempered. As the force penetrated his skin, a cool feeling continuously emerged. Strands of sweat, along with tiny drops of blood, continuously rushed from his body to the surface of his skin. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 20 minutes later, Bai Ziyu finally completed a circulation of energy. However, Ouyang did not dare to stop because as time passed, the medicinal effect accumulated even more. Under the impetus of the majestic vital energy, Ouyang began to circulate the pill again. 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles. After a total of 7 circulations, the surging power of qi and blood in his body was finally depleted. At this time, not only was his body completely drenched, but there were also strands of condensed blood that looked extremely terrifying. These blood stains were the extravasated blood that was expelled from his body when the force washed and tempered the membrane. Ziyu had already anticipated the situation on his body. Without hesitation, he picked up a talisman from the table beside him, and the force in his body surged. In an instant, the talisman in his hand flashed, and a layer of special halo was applied to Ziyu's body. After a few breaths, not only were the bloodstains on Ziyu's body completely removed, even the clothes he was wearing became clean, and there was not a trace of dirt. This was the magical effect of the cleansing talisman. Every time he finished his cultivation, he would use a cleansing talisman, and his body would immediately become incomparably clean. His entire body emitted a refreshing feeling, which was really convenient and fast. In this way, he no longer had to hide outside to clean himself and worry about whether he would be discovered by others. As for the method of using force to activate the talisman, it was also the result of his thinking. The power locked in the talisman was actually a kind of unstable spell. Generally, it would be activated when it was torn apart by people or when it was subjected to intense stimulation. The influx of a martial artist's force was naturally a kind of external stimulation, thus allowing the talisman to be activated smoothly. Moreover, compared to tearing the talisman with his hands to activate it, his method of activating the talisman through force was much faster. The effect of the energy pill is indeed powerful. Not only did it greatly increase my strength and physique, but more importantly, I finally took advantage of the situation and entered the level 5 golden body. Looking at his white, jade-like skin and feeling the toughness in it, as well as the surging power in his body, Ziyu was incomparably delighted. Level 5 golden body entry. This also meant that he could finally use the power of his spiritual energy to quickly advance the external tempering technique and achieve the goal of increasing his strength. Looking at his own attributes, Ziyu became even more excited. Name: Ziyu power 2, 89, unupgradable. Speed 2, 78, unupgradable. Physique 2, 99, unupgradable. Mind 1, 85, unupgradable. Martial arts, Great Circle of Meditation stance, unupgradable. Level 5 golden body entry, upgradable. Small success of 18 consecutive strikes, upgradable. Large success of straight punch, unupgradable. Immortal technique. Purple Chi divine observation technique, unupgradable. Talisman technique entry, upgradable. Spiritual energy, 735-inch. My strength, speed, and physique have all been greatly improved now. I should be able to break through 3 very soon. Ziyu didn't pay much attention to these numbers. This was because every time he cultivated the 5th stage golden body cultivation method, his various attributes would more or less increase. The performance of these numbers was not surprising. Instead, he was more interested in the mind attribute that had appeared later. Originally, he had thought that his mind attribute would only be able to increase after he entered the purple Chi divine observation technique. He hadn't expected that he would discover by chance that he could also slowly increase his mind power by drawing talismans. After a few days of drawing talismans, his mind attribute had increased to 185. This had indeed surprised and delighted him. He was looking forward to drawing talismans even more. However, the most important thing now is to increase my strength. With this thought in mind, Ziyu's gaze landed on the level 5 golden body that had already entered the level 5 golden body. Consume 500 points of spiritual energy to upgrade level 5 golden body to small success. Chapter 54. As expected, the 5th stage golden body requires a lot more soul power to advance than other martial techniques. Even though he had expected it, the requirement of 500 soul power still made him frown. When he first cultivated the Dhyana stance, he only needed 200 soul power to advance from entry to small success. His straight punch and 18 consecutive strikes only needed 300 soul power to advance to small success. Now, his 5th stage golden body had increased to 500 soul power, which was not a small leap. Advance. Looking at the amount of soul power he had, Ziyue still chose to advance. In an instant, a large amount of memories about cultivating the 5th stage golden body appeared in his mind. His skin, flesh, and blood also seemed to have undergone countless tempering, forging, and reorganization in a short period of time, becoming tough and powerful. His physical strength was increasing at a rapid rate. Even his height had grown slightly taller. 5th stage golden body initial success. In other words, I have reached the 2nd stage of the 5th stage golden body. Ziyue had a plan in his mind. The 5th stage golden body of the external forging technique was divided into the skin, the flesh, the tendons, the bones, the marrow, and the 5th stage golden body. 4 of the bone marrow and the 5th stage golden body were missing. Therefore, he should be at the 2nd stage of the flesh, which was the same as the martial arts realm. In other words, his current strength was at the middle stage of the external forging technique. Name: Ziyue strength 3. 24 cannot be improved. Speed 3. 02 cannot be improved. Physique 3. 38 cannot be improved. Spirit 1. 85 cannot be improved. Martial arts. Perfect Dhyana stance cannot be improved. 5th stage golden body initial success cannot be improved. 18 consecutive strikes initial success cannot be improved. Great success of straight punch cannot be improved. Immortal arts. Purple chi visualization technique cannot be improved before entry. Talisman technique entry can be improved. Soul power 235. Looking at his data again, he found that all his physical attributes, except for spirit, had increased to more than 3 points. As for the 5th stage golden body, he had officially broken through and reached small success. However, what made him feel a little helpless was that his soul power was insufficient again. I only have about 200 soul power left. I might as well not keep it and upgrade my talisman technique. Ziyue was also straightforward and directly clicked on the talisman technique. Consume 200 soul energy to upgrade talisman technique to small mastery. Upgrade. In an instant, a large amount of memories related to drawing talismans appeared. Even his spiritual power had increased by a notch, reaching 12. I didn't expect to receive such an unexpected surprise while improving the talisman technique. Ziyue's eyes gradually brightened as he absorbed this enlightenment. The improvement of his charm technique had greatly boosted his confidence. He had already made up his mind to start drawing some high-difficulty charms. The increase in his spiritual power made him even more excited. This was because the success of the talisman itself was related to his ability to draw talismans, but it was also related to the strength of his spiritual power. The stronger one's mental strength, the higher the success rate of drawing talismans. If one's mental strength was too weak, they wouldn't even be able to draw spiritual energy into the talisman. How would they be able to draw the talisman successfully? Ziyue didn't forget that there was still Wu Hao, the 2nd disciple of the 5th channel head, outside. He was a true cultivator of the immortal arts and was eyeing him covetously. Naturally, he needed stronger mental strength to draw stronger talismans to deal with the other party's schemes. The soul-subduing talisman can suppress ghosts and spirits. It also has a certain degree of destructive power against ghosts. At night, Ziyue couldn't wait to start drawing talismans. This time, he planned to draw the soul-subduing talisman. The soul-subduing talisman was extremely useful against ghosts. According to the introduction of the 100 Talisman Catalog, even malicious ghosts would be injured if they were touched by the soul-subduing talisman. After knowing that Wu Hao could exorcise ghosts and raise ghosts, he had long been looking forward to this kind of talisman. Holding the talisman brush in his hand and placing the ink at the side, Zue took out 100 stacks of paper and placed them on the table. Then, he pressed a jade pendant to the side. Calm down and concentrate. In an instant, Zue opened his eyes. The talisman brush was covered in ink, and he immediately started drawing talismans. The moment he raised the brush, he poured his mental strength into it. An indescribable energy between heaven and earth followed his mental strength and connected with the talisman brush. Then, it all poured into the 100 stacks of paper. Stroke by stroke, incomparably complicated patterns appeared on the 100 stacks of paper with the movement of his arm. It was almost done in one go. The soul-subduing talisman was completed. Ziyue's eyes flickered and joy appeared on his face. With the small success in the art of talismans and the increase in his mental strength, the soul-subduing talisman, which he had originally thought to be difficult, suddenly appeared on the paper. Seeing that the talisman flashed with a stronger light than when he drew the cleansing talisman and the house-subduing talisman, Ziyue's joy became even stronger. This meant that the power and effect of this talisman far surpassed the cleansing talisman and the house-subduing talisman. However, before the joy on his face could completely appear, it suddenly froze. Buzz! A dazzling light flashed, and the soul-subduing talisman instantly turned into ashes. Then, a strong gray light poured into the jade pendant that suppressed the talisman paper. Buzz! 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 A violent buzzing sound was heard. Suddenly, black and white light rushed out from the round jade. It collided with the light of the soul-subduing talisman and then canceled each other out. One breath, 2 breaths, 3 breaths. After a while, the black and white light disappeared, and the light of the soul-subduing talisman also dissipated. Ziyue was confused. What was going on? Why did the soul-subduing talisman suddenly activate? Wait, Ziyue's face suddenly changed. He looked at the jade pendant. Wasn't this the round jade that he had obtained from the female ghost after killing her? He had already forgotten the existence of this jade pendant, but he learned from the 2 punks that Wu Hao seemed to value this round jade very much, so he found it again. Unfortunately, after studying it, he still couldn't find anything, so he temporarily put it away. When he was drawing the talisman, he also used it as a paperweight and put on the talisman. He didn't expect that after drawing the soul-subduing talisman this time, it directly activated and conflicted with the round jade. It seems that there is indeed another mystery in this jade pendant. Previously, the cleansing talisman and the house-subduing talisman couldn't activate the power in it, but the soul-subduing talisman could. It should be because the soul-subduing talisman's power is strong enough. It's just that, Ziyue thought in his heart, and soon a trace of bitterness appeared on his face. Even if he understood the reason, the soul-subduing talisman that he painstakingly drew was gone, and it really made him feel helpless. This was a real loss. After all, even if he found that the soul-subduing talisman could have an effect on the round jade, it didn't seem to prove anything. Something's not right. Suddenly, Ziyue's expression froze, and a trace of surprise appeared on his face. He vaguely felt that something was wrong before, and when he looked at the attribute panel, he was suddenly shocked. Soul energy has increased. Chapter 55. His soul energy had increased. Originally, after upgrading his golden body and talisman technique, he was only left with 35 points of soul energy. It was definitely a very small number. But now, he looked at the attribute panel and found that his soul energy had increased by 100 points, reaching 135 points. What's the reason for this? Bai Ziyue blinked, unable to understand what was going on. All along, His method of obtaining soul energy had been very simple. He could obtain soul energy if someone or an animal died within 10 meters of him. In his understanding, soul energy was actually linked to the soul, but it was obvious that there was no soul in this round jade. No matter what, it's always a good thing to be able to increase my soul energy. Ziyue quickly put aside this doubt and picked up the talisman pen again. This time, Ziyue didn't use the round jade as a paperweight. Instead, he took out a small stone and put it down. Once again, he drew the soul-subduing talisman in one go. After his talisman technique had been upgraded to small success, Ziyue felt that it was much easier for him to draw talismans. Even the consumption of his mental energy had been greatly reduced. It's a pity that the strongest talismans in the 100 Talisman catalog require one to cultivate spiritual energy in their body to draw them. Otherwise, with my current ability to draw talismans, it's not impossible to try. Ziyue sighed slightly and then looked at the soul-subduing talisman again. Whether it can really increase my soul energy, I'll know after I try. Ziyue thought in his heart and casually stuck the soul-subduing talisman on the round jade. Buzz! The soul-subduing talisman was instantly activated and turned into ashes in the blink of an eye. Then, a clear gray light directly enveloped the round jade. Another black and white light rushed out from the round jade. When the soul-subduing talisman's energy was exhausted, the black and white light also retreated. It really increased. Another 100 points of soul energy. Ziyue was a little excited in his heart. Originally, Ziyue obtained most of his soul energy from a slaughterhouse. The amount he obtained every day was still limited. Now that there was finally another way, it naturally made him happy. According to this calculation, perhaps I can soon upgrade my Stage 5 Golden Body to large success and reach Stage 3 Tendons and Bones. The third stage of Tendons and Bones was equivalent to the late stage of External Forging, the realm of External Forging. This level of strength was not considered weak among martial artists. Many of the ordinary disciples and inner disciples of the Scorching Sun Gang were at this level. As for the fifth phase Golden Body, it would normally require 1,000 points of soul energy to reach the Great Accomplishment stage. In other words, he only needed to draw 10 soul-subduing talismans, and that would be enough. 10. 2 days is enough. Ziyue's eyes lit up, and he once again immersed himself in drawing talismans. 1 sheet, 2 sheets, 3 sheets. After 5 shots, Ziyue's head started to feel dizzy. His face was so tired that he could barely open his eyes. He was about to fall asleep. He knew that this was dizziness caused by the exhaustion of his spiritual energy. Not bothering to stick the soul-subduing talisman on the round jade, Ziyue directly climbed onto the bed, and almost instantly, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. Time passed, and the night deepened. Outside the door, the sound of the wind was so strong that the paper on the window fluttered rapidly, making rustling sounds. Unknowingly, the moon was completely covered by dark clouds, and the entire world was pitch black. Suddenly, an extremely cold and gloomy aura filled the entire room. Originally, ever since Ziyue started practicing martial arts, although he could not be invulnerable to the cold, he was not too afraid of the cold. At this time, however, he could not help but shiver. In a daze, he pulled the quilt and covered himself entirely. Whoosh whoosh. In the cold wind, a white figure suddenly appeared outside the door. The other party was dressed in white, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. However, his legs were directly suspended in the air, and he was a full 10 centimeters away from the ground. It was obvious that this was a ghost. Creak, creak. Following the appearance of the other party's figure, the sound of the paper window fluttering seemed to become more intense. As if identifying the direction and aura, it paused for a moment, and then quickly approached the room where Ziyue was. Its body floated closer across the ground. As if it had sensed the change in aura, the sound of the paper window stopped at this time. A trace of a strange smile appeared on the ghost's face. It gradually approached the door, and its body directly pressed against it, squeezing slightly. The door did not move, but its body squeezed in an instant. It had entered the room. Yang energy, what a strong yang energy, a muffled voice was heard. It looked somewhat greedily at Zif, who was on the bed, and wanted to get closer. Suddenly, its gaze turned and saw a pen, a stack of paper, and a piece of jade on the table. Yin-yang jade pendant. Thinking of its master's instructions, it suppressed its greed for the yang energy and rushed directly to the yin-yang jade pendant on the table. Ordinary ghosts, unless they were malicious ghosts, would not be able to touch physical objects. However, the yin-yang jade pendant was different. It was a type of dharma artifact that leaned towards evil. Even ordinary ghosts could wear it. Soon, it came close to the yin-yang jade pendant. Just as it was about to take the jade pendant, on top of the stack of paper, the paper that was filled with runes suddenly shone brightly. In an instant, the paper was activated and turned into ashes. Then, an intense gray light directly enveloped the ghost. The soul, subduing talisman, was stimulated by the yin energy on the ghost's body and activated. Talisman? Talisman technique? It was stunned. How could an ordinary person know how to use talisman techniques? Moreover, it was a talisman that could cause great damage to it. However, its panic could not change the outcome. The power of the soul, subduing talisman, instantly made it feel extreme pain. Waves of miserable, ghostly howls came from its mouth. Its originally almost solid body was instantly corroded by the power of the soul, subduing talisman, and was almost transparent. The strength of a ghost was related to the strength of its soul. When its soul became transparent, its strength would naturally be greatly reduced. Under the intense fear, the ghost no longer cared about its master's instructions and wanted to escape. However, no matter how deeply Zeus slept due to the mental exhaustion, he immediately woke up at this time. In an instant, he saw the white ghost turn into a ray of light, trying to escape through the wall. "How dare you?" Zeus' expression changed. He jumped out of bed, and the energy in his body surged. In an instant, a wave of energy flowed up from his feet and gathered in his arms. A punch was thrown out fiercely. Straight punch. The full mastery level of the straight punch, combined with Zeus' current tyrannical blood chi, had far exceeded the limits of what he could achieve in the past. A thick wave of blood chi, like smoke, sprayed out from the force and hit the ghost body. Poof! The ghost was torn to shreds like a rag. Then, it dissipated like a puff of smoke. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.